Chapter 319. He quickly glanced at the details below. Stan Winston's studio was established in 1972. So far, it had taken on the special effects work for many movies, including the famous Terminator and the sequel to Alien. It even won an Oscar for Best Special Visual Effects in 1986. After searching his mind, Eric also found a lot of other information. In his previous life, the Digital Domain Movie Special Effects Company, which stood side by side with Industrial Light and Magic and Vita Digital, was founded by Stan Winston and James Cameron. This studio's achievements in CG technology were even more advanced than Industrial Light and Magic's. However, Digital Domain was not like Industrial Light and Magic, which had a strong accumulation of technology and a steady stream of projects. It was also not like Vita Digital, which was located in New Zealand in the Southern Hemisphere, and enjoyed all kinds of support from Jiangsu. In addition, the signboard James Cameron and the founder, John Tixter, left one after another. Stan Winston passed away due to illness. In the end, without a leader, Digital Domain was reduced to bankruptcy. However, there was no doubt that Stan Winston's ability was unquestionable to be able to develop Digital Domain to the same level as Industrial Light and Magic. Therefore, Eric quickly identified a target. Alan, help me contact Mr. Stan Winston. Eric took out the information of Stan Winston's studio and handed it to Alan. Try to hurry up. Ghost's schedule is very tight. The preparations in New York are already done. I only need the female lead here. The most important thing now is to solve the special effects problem. Alan took the information and looked at it. He nodded, but still could not help but advise. Eric, I think if the special effects are handed over to Industrial Light and Magic, the movie will definitely be completed on time. But if we do it ourselves, the effect and time will be very difficult to determine. Eric was silent for a moment before he said, Everyone has to learn how to walk on their own. You should contact Stan Winston as soon as possible. All right, I understand. Alan nodded. Just as he was about to leave, someone knocked on the office door. After receiving permission, the female secretary poked her head in and said, Mr. Williams, Mr. Lester and Miss Connolly are here. Let them in, Eric said. Alan had just heard Eric answering the call from the front desk, so he tactfully turned around and left. Jim Lester and Jennifer Connolly walked in one after another. Hello, Mr. Williams. Jim Lester extended his hand and shook Eric's hand as he walked out from behind his desk. Hello, Jim. Eric smiled and let go of the man's hand, then looked at Jennifer Connolly. The woman lowered her head slightly, but she quickly raised it again and tried to look straight at Eric. She wanted to show a generous smile, but her expression was a little uncomfortable. Jenny, long time no see, Eric said gently. Yes, yes. The woman nodded, as if she felt that this answer was a little inappropriate. She wanted to say something, but Eric had already pointed to the sofa in the lounge. Let's talk there. The three of them sat down on the sofa, and the secretary quickly left after serving coffee. Eric was not in a hurry to speak. He sat on the sofa opposite the two of them, and looked at the woman in front of him without hiding anything. Jennifer Connolly and Eric's eyes met for a moment, then quickly looked away in a panic. The man's gaze was almost the same as it was a year ago. What have you been busy with this year, Jenny? Eric asked after a while. The woman hesitated, not knowing what to say. Could she tell him that she had been going around for auditions, running into rejection everywhere, or being ignored by her agent? Jim Lester was here now, and even if her agent wasn't here, she couldn't say that. After all, it had been a year, and she understood that there was nothing wrong with what her agent had done. Seeing the woman's embarrassed expression, Jim Lester took the initiative to help her out. Mr. Williams, Jenny has been studying at Stanford University for most of this year. You know, she's still young, and it's never wrong to learn more. Eric nodded, looked at the woman and asked, Is that so? Jennifer Connolly bit her lower lip but still said softly, Yes, it is. Eric continued, By the way, last night, I and that. Sorry, I forgot his name. I think it was Brandt. Tony Brandt, Jim Lester reminded him politely. Eric nodded. Yes, it was Tony Brandt. I had some conflict with that gentleman, and it ruined your female lead role. The woman didn't have any reaction, but Jim Rester was surprised. He didn't know about this. However, when he recalled Tony Brandt's tone when he called him in the morning, Jim Lester quickly understood what was going on. Just as he was about to blame Tony Brandt, he quickly reacted to the situation. It was just a small production's female lead role, so it didn't matter if she lost it. As long as she could hug the big shot in front of her, she wouldn't have to worry about not having a role. It's okay, Mr. Williams. Actually, that movie wasn't suitable for Jenny, so it's fine if she doesn't act in it. Eric looked at the woman, and Jennifer Connelly forced a smile, but didn't say anything. You should know that I've been planning to make a movie recently, and I just happened to confirm the male lead role last night. The preparations in New York have also been completed. As long as we can find the female lead, we can start shooting. When he said this, even Jennifer Connelly, who had been pretending to be reserved, couldn't help but light up. Jim Rester's eyes flashed with ecstasy. However, Eric continued, it's just a pity that the female lead role in that movie isn't suitable for Jenny. After that, Eric slowly picked up his coffee and looked at the changes in their expressions. He teased them a little. Their expressions were really interesting. Even though Jim Rester realized that Eric did it on purpose, he didn't dare to show any displeasure, but the regret on his face was obvious. Jennifer Connelly, on the other hand, clutched the corner of her dress tightly. She was still wearing the dress from the party last night. After hearing Eric's words, the woman couldn't help but breathe a little faster due to her disappointment. Jim Rester thought for a while, and still asked unwillingly, Mr. Williams, maybe you can let Jenny audition and see how it goes. Her performance in last year's Death of the Swan was quite outstanding. Eric shook his head. If it's just a matter of acting, then it's not a problem at all. The key is the image. My movie needs the image of a housewife, but Jenny's temperament is too cold and glamorous. It's not suitable at all. That's really a pity. Jim Rester shook his head and sighed. Eric took a sip of his coffee and said leisurely, but it's not a big deal. Hollywood shoots hundreds of movies every year. Even if it's the Big Seven, the total number of movies produced every year is also in the hundreds. Finding a movie suitable for Jenny is a piece of cake. Jennifer Connelly was still a little doubtful. Everyone knew that Eric was besieged some time ago. Although no evidence was revealed, everyone knew that the Big Seven must have been behind it. Now, Eric should be in a deadlock with the Big Seven. What was the use of saying all this? However, Jim Rester saw it more clearly than Jennifer Connelly. Since Eric had successfully weathered that storm, it meant that Firefly's position in Hollywood had been confirmed whether the Big Seven were willing or not. Under such circumstances, with Eric's current status in Hollywood, asking for a female lead role from one of the Big Seven was a piece of cake. He believed that any one of the Big Seven would be very willing to give Eric face. Mr. Williams, is what you said true? Eric nodded. Of course, but it will take some time. I have to get someone to look for it first. Also, I need Jenny's cooperation. Don't worry, Jenny will definitely fully cooperate with you this time. The agent blurted out without waiting for Eric to finish. The atmosphere suddenly became a little awkward. Not only did the girl's face turn red, but even Eric himself felt his face heat up. Did he know how to speak? So direct. Ahem, Jenny has to make time to cooperate with some auditions. After all, only by passing the auditions can I help to lobby. If the role is not suitable for Jenny, then even if she gets it, it will only have a negative impact on Jenny's career in the future. Although he felt that there was no use in trying to salvage the situation, Eric still added on what he had just said. I understand, Jim Rester said fawningly. In the midst of the awkwardness, there was a knock on the door. Alan poked his head in and showed an apologetic look. Mr. Williams, there's something urgent. Wait a moment, Eric said hurriedly and then left the office. It's like this, Mr. Williams. I just called Mr. Stan Winston. After explaining the purpose of my visit, he agreed very quickly. Also, the time is set at 11:30 today. By the way, Mr. Stan Winston also hopes to bring a friend, so I thought it would be better to inform you as soon as possible. Friend. Eric raised his eyebrows and quickly thought of someone. Stan Winston's best friend, without a doubt, must be Cameron. No problem. Is the phone still online? I'll talk to him personally. He's already hung up, Alan said regretfully. But if you agree, it's already 10:30 now. The location is at Krar Restaurant in Beverly Hills. I think you should, pay attention to the time. Eric looked at his watch and glanced at his office. He nodded. Don't worry, I got it. Then I'll get to work, the assistant said quickly. I'm sorry, both of you. There's a situation. Eric returned to the office and said to Jim Rester and Jennifer Connelly, I'm afraid we can't talk too much. It's okay, Mr. Williams. Maybe we can arrange a time to have dinner together. How about tonight? Sorry, I have plans tonight, Eric said as he thought of the tall girl. Since he had made up his mind to hold Famick Johnson in his hands, he obviously had to take advantage of the situation to go on a few more dates to increase their relationship. Material things were necessary, but so was feelings. After some thought, Eric said to Jennifer Connelly, By the way, Jenny, I'm going on a date later. Would you like to be my date? The girl hesitated when she heard Eric's words. Jim Rester almost wanted to agree on behalf of the girl, but at this time he felt it was better to let the girl make her own decision. It's just a normal lunch, Eric added. The other party is a very famous special effects artist in Hollywood, and maybe a director. After lunch, I'll send you back. Then okay. Jennifer Connelly nodded when she heard Eric say that. Eric smiled and looked at the girl's dress. Actually, your outfit is just right. Yes, very beautiful. Thank you, the girl said softly. In that case, I'll leave first. After the girl agreed, Jim Rester felt relieved and quickly stood up to leave. Eric sent him out and returned to the office again. The girl suddenly became more uneasy when only the two of them were left in the room. Wait a moment, let me change, Eric said lightly to the girl and walked to the small room next to the office. Stan, why do you think that little guy is looking for you? In Krar Restaurant in Beverly Hills, two big men sat in a corner. The man with a crew cut said to the middle-aged man with a big beard, I heard that he's going to use special effects in his next movie. With that young man's ambition, what do you think, James? James Cameron paused and quickly said, You mean he wants to buy your studio? It's obvious, Stan Winston said without changing his smile. I see that you're very interested. James Cameron thought for a moment and laughed. He's a billionaire, very rich. Last year he bought Steve Jobs' animation studio. It's said that he invested tens of millions into it. Nothing came out, but he still invested without blinking. Such a generous young man. Of course I'm very interested. You know, special effects are very expensive. With money, you can experiment with more interesting things. Also, this is why I brought you here. Haven't you always wanted to make Terminator 2? This is a good opportunity. James Cameron suddenly looked excited, but soon shook his head in disappointment. That young man has never made a high-budget movie. I remember that the movie he invested the most in, Dark War, only cost $30 million, and it was Columbia who paid for it. Although I lowered the budget for Terminator 2 again and again, and only reported a budget of $70 million, none of the big 7 companies were willing to take it. I don't think they'll take the risk. Anyway, you can't find an investor now. Stan Winston patted his friend's shoulder. So it's better to try than wait. Chapter 320. Although model special effects are still the mainstream technology used in special effects movies, I'm sure that in 10 to 20 years, CG special effects will definitely replace model special effects as the mainstream of special effects movies. About 10 years ago, Industrial Light and Magic created full CG scenes in movies, and in Jim's Abyss last year, there were even full CG characters. These are the most direct manifestations of this development trend. In Krar Restaurant, Eric was talking to Stan Winston and James Cameron opposite him. Although the two opposite him were both special effects artists, in terms of professional special effects technology, Eric certainly could not show off his slight skill in front of an expert. However, Eric's identity as a time traveler made him see the development trend of special effects more clearly than the two opposite him. Therefore, after finding the right topic, he could easily seize the initiative of the conversation. Eric, I don't agree with what you said. Although CG special effects can achieve more diverse scenes, it is still too expensive. In comparison, model special effects are much cheaper. You must know that Jim's Terminator only cost $6.5 million US. If CG special effects were used, maybe the $6.5 million US would not even be enough to cover the cost of the special effects, Stan Winston retorted. Of course, I'm just saying that CG special effects are the main development trend of special effects, but model special effects will always play their role. Speaking of which, Eric suddenly turned to James Cameron as if nothing had happened. Jim, have you ever thought of making a sequel to Terminator? I remember you said in an interview that you had many regrets in the first Terminator that were not realized. Hearing this question, James Cameron and Stan Winston looked at each other at the same time. They had been talking for more than half an hour, and lunch was almost over. Originally, James Cameron did not know how to bring up this topic, but he did not expect Eric to take the initiative to ask. Eric, actually, I have already written the script for the second movie, but I am still looking for investors, James Cameron said, pretending to be reserved. Although he was known as the tyrant of the set, James Cameron was usually not a hot-tempered person. When he was looking for investors for a movie, he did not lack any tricks. Otherwise, he would not have been able to get the investment time and time again in his previous life. Eric certainly understood James Cameron's thoughts, and he was also very clear about James Cameron's current situation. Although Cameron had not yet evolved into the comma of the future, as a transmigrator, Eric would certainly pay special attention to this name. He also maintained the good habit of reading newspapers and magazines every day, so he knew a lot of the developments in Hollywood like the back of his hand. Therefore, when news of James Cameron occasionally appeared in the newspapers, Eric would subconsciously take a second look at it and remember it in his heart. The cost of James Cameron's Abyss last year was as high as US $70 million, which was exactly twice the investment of Warner's Batman, which was a global hit last year. Although it eventually received a series of good reviews and an Oscar nomination, the box office was very miserable. The North American box office only grossed over US $50 million, while the overseas box office grossed only US $30 million. Since the box office was not good, the corresponding peripheral films would not be too good either. Therefore, this movie brought a loss of US $30 million for Fox. In Eric's memory, this was the only movie of James Cameron that made the investors lose money. After being severely cheated, Fox of course would not invest in Cameron's new movie, let alone the more expensive Terminator 2. Although the first movie did well at the box office, it was not enough for Fox to take the risk to fork out money again, and the other 6 major film companies that did not cooperate much with Cameron were even more unlikely to fork out money so easily. In his memory, Terminator 2 was made by a film company called Kerala, who sold everything they had and raised $100 million US. In the end, it received more than $500 million US at the box office worldwide. For this movie that was destined to be a big hit, although the investment was a little high, Eric certainly did not intend to let it go. Moreover, he did not intend to let Cameron off. After some consideration, Eric continued to ask, Jim, if it's possible, can you briefly explain the plot of Terminator 2? When James Cameron saw that Eric was interested in the movie, a glimmer of hope suddenly ignited in his heart. Of course, but please keep it a secret and don't disclose it. That's for sure. Eric nodded, then said to Jennifer Connelly, who was doing her job as a vase, Jenny. The girl smiled knowingly, revealing 2 small canine teeth. Don't worry, I won't either. Then the story is probably like this. James Cameron briefly explained the outline of his creation. When Jennifer Connelly heard James Cameron's idea of the liquid metal robot, her eyes widened slightly with a look of disbelief and surprise. Eric already had the complete movie in his memory. In addition, James Cameron did not have much talent in telling stories verbally, so he did not show any strange expressions. He just listened attentively to Cameron's narration. Occasionally, he would find some differences between Cameron's story outline and the movie. For example, in Cameron's story outline, Sarah Connor, played by Linda Hamilton, was not locked up in a mental hospital. Of course, these were just some insignificant details. During the entire narration process, Cameron and Stan Winston had been silently paying attention to Eric's expression. When he found that Eric's expression did not change much, Cameron suddenly felt that something was wrong. If a story could not interest investors, then the possibility of getting an investment was definitely slim. Jim, according to your idea, the cost of this movie is definitely not low. Have you done a preliminary budget? Eric asked after Cameron finished speaking. I have. Although the idea of the liquid metal robot may cost a little more, I only need 70. No, 60 million. I only need 60 million US dollars to make this movie. The liquid metal robot does not have to use all the CG. Some of the scenes can still use relatively cheap models. I have discussed this with Stan, Cameron said. In the end, he unconsciously took the initiative to promote to Eric. His original pretense of being reserved was also thrown to the back of his mind. After all, among the people he knew, Eric was the most likely to come up with this amount of money. The funding for several movies released around Christmas last year had already begun to recoup. Coupled with the video and other peripherals, it could bring in at least 400 million US dollars for Firefly. Stan Winston quickly echoed. Yes, Eric, we can use Mercury or models to replace some of the scenes. 60 million US dollars of investment is enough. 60 million US dollars? As if you can make this movie. Eric complained in his heart. His face became solemn. 60 million, almost 10 times the investment of the previous movie. Firefly has never operated a movie with such a large investment. Eric, believe me, this movie will definitely not disappoint you. Cameron wanted to continue saying something, but he was interrupted by Eric. Since James Cameron had not found an investor yet, it was necessary to whet Cameron's appetite. If it was too easy to get an investment, then Cameron would be even more unscrupulous in his squandering. Eric even had the idea of letting Jeffrey be the producer of Terminator 2, but he quickly gave up. Jeffrey's frugality and Cameron's squandering happened to be two extremes. It would be strange if they did not fight when they were together. Sorry, Jim, I need to think about it carefully. 60 million US dollars of investment is not a small amount. Let's talk about business today. Stan, I think you must have guessed something. I plan to set up a movie special effects company, and I want to invite you and your team to join. In the future, this movie company will be responsible for most of the special effects work for Firefly's movies. Stan Winston was not angry because of Cameron's rejection. Eric's cautious reaction to Terminator 2 was almost inevitable. It would be strange if he immediately agreed. Eric, why me? I mean, there are many excellent special effects teams in Hollywood. Eric remembered something Stan Winston once said in his previous life. He smiled and replied, because they only do special effects, but you are using special effects to perform. Stan Winston was a little moved. This sentence touched the deepest nerve in Stan's heart. Once upon a time, Stan Winston's dream was to be a movie actor, but dreams and reality were always very different. After graduating from college, Stan Winston worked as a makeup apprentice at Disney for 3 years, and then opened his own Winston studio. Later, he realized that he did not completely abandon his dream. Actors were performing with themselves, but he was performing with special effects. Therefore, over the years, Stan Winston had always maintained his passion for movie special effects. He was even often described as crazy. This consistent passion for movie special effects was the main reason for Stan Winston's success. To be honest, without Stan Winston, James Cameron would not have been able to shoot the classic Terminator with a mere $6.5 million US dollars. Because of a serious lack of funds, the Terminator robot in the first movie was just a simple metal model without any mechanical kinetic equipment. Therefore, the special effects of the robot's movements in the movie were almost shot frame by frame, using a method similar to stop-motion animation. The movie had 24 frames per second and 1440 frames per minute. It was easy to imagine how much work it took to shoot a scene that was several minutes long. If one did not have enough faith and passion, no one would be able to persevere. Chapter 321. However, although he was a little moved by Eric's words, Stan still had no intention of relenting. He said, Eric, what you just said is almost exactly the same as what I thought. I've never thought that special effects is just a marginal profession. Without special effects, a box office miracle like Star Wars would never happen again. let alone other movies that use a lot of special effects. However, I know that you've only been shooting drama movies and have not participated in the production of special effects movies. Many Hollywood directors don't pay much attention to special effects. Although some special effects were used in Ghost this time, do you have any specific plans for this company in the future? I don't like to be in a situation where I have nothing to do after joining. Eric immediately shook his head and said, "Of course not. I can tell you very clearly, Stan, my goal is to surpass Industrial Light and Magic. You should know about Jurassic Park, right? This project definitely won't drag on for too long. There's also Resident Evil. Recently, I handed a draft to my book agent. It's also a science fiction novel called The Matrix. These 3 novels will be made into at least a trilogy of special effects movies in the future. Therefore, the special effects company will not lack projects in the next 10 years. Industrial Light and Magic can develop to its current scale only with the Star Wars series, and Firefly's special effects movies will definitely be much more than Lucasfilm's in the future. As long as the special effects company can handle it, I don't mind letting my own special effects company do all of it." Stan Winston had not read the novel version of Resident Evil, nor did he hear anything about it from the name The Matrix. However, he knew about Jurassic Park. This novel had attracted the attention of many movie companies, but Eric had never given up the movie rights. His purpose was obvious. Eric definitely planned to produce this movie himself. Imagining the scene of ancient giant dinosaurs resurrected on the big screen, Stan Winston was already a little excited, but he did not lose his calm. Instead, he asked, "Then Eric, about my conditions for joining the company. You know, although my current studio is very small, I'm the boss myself. I don't lack projects." Eric said, "I'll give you 10% of the shares. The special effects company will be completely handed over to you to manage. The company will not be listed for 10 years. I will always provide the company with enough funds, but before the company is listed, no matter how much money I invest, I will never dilute your personal shares." Stan Winston still remained cautious. Although 10% of the shares was not a lot, if Eric could provide enough funds for the development of the special effects company, he would not mind it. "Eric, I don't have any objections about 10% of the shares, but although I know you have enough funds, you still need a specific investment amount, not an ambiguous promise. You know, in Hollywood, a lot of investment promises can't be fulfilled." Eric thought for a while and said, "For the first investment of $20 million, I hope that this money will be used to purchase equipment, research and development of computer CG technology, as well as the preparation of the early special effects for Jurassic Park. Therefore, you can also see it as the early investment for Jurassic Park. By the way, Pixar can provide some technical support to the special effects company. At the same time, the special effects company will have to set up its own CG technology research and development team." Stan Winston nodded with satisfaction and then said, "It seems that you are really optimistic about computer CG special effects?" Yes, the development of model special effects has reached its peak. However, there are also great limitations to the development of model special effects. Just like the movie Cleopatra starring Elizabeth Taylor a few decades ago, if there was a production system at that time, there would be no need to risk bankruptcy for large-scale real-life construction. In addition, model special effects can't create natural landscape movie special effects. In the future, I will be making a disaster film series, which involves large-scale natural landscapes such as hurricanes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, etc. These are not things that model special effects can realistically simulate. After all, the authenticity of miniature landscapes is too difficult to guarantee. Eric smiled and said, "So, our company will maintain the foundation of model special effects, and the main research direction will be computer CG special effects. I have named this special effects company Digital Domain." "Digital Domain," Stan Winston murmured, and James Cameron, who had been listening silently, couldn't help but say, "Eric, in that case, this company is just right for the production of Terminator 2. Most of the liquid metal robots shots are planned to be made with CG, so I hope you can consider it. As long as you agree to invest part of the investment for Terminator 2, even if it's only $10 million, I can raise the rest of the funds. Eric smiled and said, Jim, I know what you are thinking. Because my previous movies were relatively successful, many people in Hollywood now believe in my vision, but I can't risk my own reputation. Otherwise, if this movie fails, no one will blame you, and I, the culprit who misled them to fork out the money, will definitely become the target of public criticism. Cameron's thoughts were exposed, and he couldn't help but blush. After all, Cameron was his good friend for many years, and Stan Winston also wanted to put in a good word for him. Thinking of this, Stan Winston couldn't help but ask, Eric, do you really not think highly of Jim's sequel movie? Hearing this question, Eric suddenly hesitated. It was impossible not to think highly of it. Originally, he just wanted to keep Cameron in suspense, but now, he was in a dilemma. After thinking about it, Eric said, It's not that I don't think highly of it, but the risk of this movie is too high. The investment of $60 million US, plus the post-production publicity budget, and not considering overseas, the North American box office is estimated to take $150 million US to recover the cost. The global box office of the first Terminator was less than 80 million, and Jim's last movie, Abyss, also had a global box office of 80 million, so you should understand my concerns. Stan Winston nodded understandingly, and James Cameron was a little disappointed. Eric pondered for a moment, and as if he had made a big decision, he said, Well, in that case, I'll take a gamble. $50 million US. Jim, I can take out $50 million US. So I hope you can take out the cautious attitude you had when you filmed the first Terminator, and try your best to shoot this movie with this budget. James Cameron only hesitated for a moment, before he quickly nodded without any integrity. Let's settle the movie project first. 50 million it is. If we can't finish filming, I don't believe that you'll let the project go down the drain, and let the 50 million go to waste. All right, Eric, I'll do my best. The two unscrupulous guys looked at each other and smiled, as if they had been friends for many years. Eric never thought that Cameron could use $50 million US to produce Terminator 2, and Cameron himself never thought of using $50 million US to produce Terminator 2. As for what would happen if the movie ran out of money halfway through production, well, it was up to him. After a while, Eric said, Right, James, since I'm taking out this money, then the copyright of Terminator must belong to me. There's no room for negotiation. James Cameron was stunned for a moment, then nodded. Anyway, in his plan, the second Terminator 2 was the end of the story. As long as he had the money to produce the story, the copyright would not be of much use to him. This, of course, no problem. However, Eric, the copyright is still in the hands of Helmdale Productions, who produced the first film. That company is now bankrupt, so we can buy the copyright back with a sum of money. Also, in my plan, I won't make any more sequels after this one. How much will it cost? Eric asked calmly. At the same time, he was a little surprised. Another super series was about to be in his hands. In his memory, he did not know if Terminator was the third or fourth film. The producer spent $30 million US just to get the copyright from his predecessor. If he got it, Eric would definitely not let it go easily. $2 million. I've already talked to the original producer, Cameron said quickly. Eric took out his checkbook, wrote a check for $2 million US, and handed it to James Cameron. Jim, I want all the copyright, the kind that can't have any disputes in the future. That's for sure, James Cameron said happily as he put the check away. The three of them discussed a lot of things. It was already 3 o'clock in the afternoon when they parted. Because the male lead of Ghost had been confirmed, the audition that was originally scheduled for today had been cancelled, so Eric did not need to go back to Firefly. Looking at Jennifer Connelly, who had been standing beside him like a flower vase, Eric said, Jenny, I'll take you back. Jennifer Connelly quietly listened to the conversation of the three people during lunch. Her salary for her last movie, Death of the Swan, was only $50,000 US, and for the movie that was ruined by Eric last night, Tony Brandt only offered her $100,000 US. Therefore, during lunch, the girl had a faint sense of unreality when the three people talked about tens of millions of US. She was even a little depressed now. No matter how hard she worked, The reward she received was not even 1/10 of the check that the man beside her casually signed. Thinking about it made her feel sad. Not hearing the girl's answer, Eric, who had just opened the car door, looked at Jennifer Connelly's face. From the other party's faint expression of disappointment, Eric quickly understood what the girl was thinking. It seemed that because of the loss of the role last year, some of the emotions accumulated in a year, after what happened last night and today, hit Jennifer Connelly hard. In this case, Eric quickly decided to add fuel to the fire. The more exciting it was, the easier it was to get hold of this girl who originally had a little fantasy. Dreams reflected in reality. That scene was really unbearable. Eric thought so in his heart. When Jennifer Connelly sat in the passenger seat, he did not ask for the girl's address again. Instead, he drove directly to Malibu. The car drove for more than 10 minutes before Jennifer Connelly reacted. She said a little nervously, You said you would take me back." Although she said so, her tone was not firm at all. Eric nodded. "Yeah, but it's only 3 o'clock now. You must have nothing to do if you go back so early. Why don't you come to my place?" The girl pinched the corner of her skirt, lowered her head, and did not say anything. Eric smiled slightly and drove all the way to the Sharp Corner Manor with the girl. As soon as they walked through the gate of the manor, Eric did not drive the car directly into the garage like before. Instead, he got out of the car at the gate and handed the keys to the security guard. He took the girl's small hand and walked to the mansion on foot. More than $20 million was invested in the Sharp Corner Manor, so it was much more luxurious than the Coppola mansion last night. As they walked, the two quickly walked into the mansion. "What do you think of this place?" Eric did not wander around the mansion with the girl. Instead, he went directly to the open-air pool on the southwest side of the mansion. It happened to be windy today, so the sound of the waves hitting the rocks under their feet was loud. "It's not bad." Connelly sat down on a deck chair next to Eric. She adjusted her skirt that was blown up by the wind and spoke softly. Because of the sea breeze, the thin dress on the girl's body was blown tightly against her body, revealing her exquisite curves. Eric admired for a while, and suddenly pointed at a small room behind him. "That's the changing room. There are spare swimsuits in there. Do you want to swim?" "But there's no water in here?" Jennifer Connelly pointed at the dried-up pool, and found a very lame excuse. "It'll be full in 5 minutes. Go change," Eric said. Jennifer Connelly bit her lower lip, got up and walked to the changing room. A few minutes later, the girl changed into a swimsuit and walked out. She saw that the pool was full of water. The temperature is just right. Eric stood by the water and reached into the pool to test the temperature. "What about you?" The girl looked at Eric, who was still dressed formally. "I'll watch you." Eric smiled and sat down on the deck chair next to him. He found a pack of cigarettes and lit it up. Then he showed an excited expression. His eyes were like an unscrupulous uncle waiting to watch a show. Jennifer Connelly stood there and hesitated for a long time. Then, she cautiously took off the bath towel on her body and quickly jumped into the water. Like a mermaid, she quickly swam into the distance. The pool was not too big, so she quickly reached the end. She leaned against the pool in the southwest corner and glanced at Eric. Seeing that the man was still looking at her with interest, the girl shyly shrank back into the water. She hesitated for a moment and swam toward Eric. For some reason, after swimming for a few meters, Connelly felt a slight pain in his right leg. Then he couldn't feel anything. His whole body flopped a few times and quickly sank. While struggling, the girl saw the figure by the swimming pool quickly jump into the water. It didn't take long for the figure to reach her side. Then her whole body was lifted out of the water. The water in the swimming pool only reached Eric's abdomen. It wasn't too deep. Looking at the girl's flustered appearance, Eric reminded her, "Don't move. You might have a cramp." After massaging the girl's cramped calf, Eric sent someone to send the girl back. Anyway, the meat was already in the pot. There was no hurry. At the same time, he let the girl digest the various information she had received in the past 2 days. If Jennifer Connelly had the courage to immediately pack up and leave Hollywood in order to not be a vassal, Eric would accept it. Of course, he was 100% sure that the girl would not give up the flashy life of fame and fortune. In the next few days, Eric once again immersed himself in his busy work. Due to the dispute with Robert Shaye, Eric set up another film company. Moreover, since the initial company was called Firefly, Eric took the opportunity to name it Black Ant. In fact, he originally wanted to name it Black Spider, but Jeffrey firmly objected. This name was too unconventional. If it was just a small production company, it would not be a big deal. However, although this company would not develop into a giant like Firefly, it would definitely not be a small one. Therefore, after some discussion, Eric gave the company the name Black Ant Film Company. Then, the Basic Instinct project was quickly transferred to this company. At the same time, because of the movie's content, in order to avoid being rated NC-17 in the future, Eric chose to cooperate with Universal among the Big Seven. Compared to the other film giants, Universal did not have any big movie projects this year. Therefore, they could use most of their resources on this movie. Moreover, the other party offered a relatively fair price. Both parties shared the copyright and split the investment equally. The movie project was still completely led by Eric himself. He had absolute control over this movie project. In fact, the Big Seven originally had the initiative in this project. Everyone could see that Eric chose to cooperate with them to avoid something. However, after the previous incident, it was difficult for the Big Seven to unite as one. Basically, no one trusted anyone. Therefore, when it came to quoting prices, they all offered their own. The reason why Universal could offer the best price was because Japan's Matsushita Financial Group, like Sony, had launched an acquisition of Universal's parent company, MCA. Universal, of course, wanted to stimulate the share price through a hit movie, just like Columbia. A few days later, James Cameron quickly obtained the copyright of Terminator and handed it over to Eric. The originally agreed investment of $50 million was definitely not enough. Although he had made up his mind to cheat Eric, forcing him to invest more when his funds were exhausted, Cameron still felt a little guilty. Therefore, he made some minor changes to the copyright contract. This change was actually very simple. Originally, in the contract signed by James Cameron and the production company, there was a clause that stated that the film copyright of Terminator would automatically return to his own hands after 2018. However, Cameron, who felt a little guilty, quickly removed this clause. After all, he had made up his mind that Terminator 2 was the end of his personal series. Therefore, the copyright was not of much use to him. At least, that was what he thought in his heart. Cameron could not be Eric. Of course, he did not think that the copyright of this series would be worth so much in the future. Eric was certainly happy to see this, but he did not put the copyright in Firefly. Instead, he put it in the newly established Black Ant Film Company. This was because when he discussed the Terminator 2 project with Robert Shaye once again raised conservative objections. His concerns were similar to those of the Big Seven. Therefore, Eric did not have any psychological burden. Terminator 2 was like Basic Instinct, becoming the second work after the establishment of Black Ant. As for whether there would be problems in the future distribution, Eric did not consider it for the time being. After all, Cameron's filming speed was not fast. It would be good enough if this movie could be released in the summer next year. While the two matters of Basic Instinct and Terminator were settled, the digital domain was quickly established. After Eric readily allocated $20 million in startup funds, Stan Winston quickly began to recruit and at the same time set up the headquarters in Venice, Los Angeles. This Venice was of course not Venice, Italy. It was a district of Los Angeles, located near the city of Santa Monica. Eric remembered that more than 10 years later, because of the gathering of high-tech companies, it would be called Silicon Beach, echoing San Francisco's Silicon Valley. In the midst of the complicated affairs, Eric personally went to persuade Julia, and she quickly agreed to Robert Shaye's Sleeping with the Enemy. After 2 consecutive hit movies, the actress offered $8 million, and Robert Shaye actually agreed. Eric shrugged at the actress's exorbitant demand. Anyway, Julia was definitely worth the price. After that, the female lead of Ghost was quickly finalized. In the end, Eric chose Brigitte Fonda, the niece that Jane Fonda had personally recommended, among a large number of actresses who auditioned. The reason why he chose her was not only because the actress's image was very suitable, but also because he had gathered the backs of two major Hollywood families to act in his movie. It would be a good publicity stunt in the future. From the earliest silent era of Henry Fonda to Peter Fonda, then to Jane Fonda, and finally to the fourth generation of Bridget Fonda, this family had stood tall in Hollywood for more than half a century. Although the Coppola family rose a little later, their power and connections were not much worse than the Fonda family. If he could be on good terms with these two families at the same time, it would definitely be useful in the future. For example, the Oscars. Although Eric was still very young, there was no way he could avoid the Oscars. No one in Hollywood could avoid it. In his previous life, Showley had an unruly personality, but he was tortured to death by the Oscars. After reaching an agreement with Stan, Eric asked him about the special effects in Ghost. Although Stan used to specialize in special effects, he quickly came up with a solution for the special effects in Ghost. Even though Eric wanted to make it more detailed than in his previous life, it was not difficult. It was just a matter of money. In the end, Basic Instinct, Sleeping with the Enemy, Ghost, and The Silence of the Lambs produced by TG Film, which was set up by Elizabeth and a few others. According to the plan, The Silence of the Lambs had already started filming for some time, so it was scheduled to be released in early June by Firefly. Next was Sleeping with the Enemy. Although this movie was prepared late, it was a very simple movie with no big scenes and no special effects. Therefore, 2 months of production was enough, and it was scheduled to be released in late June. The middle of June was the peak of the summer box office. Robert Shaye could not have made this arrangement without selfish motives. However, Eric did not object. Next was Ghost at the beginning of July. The production of this movie was almost the same as last year's Dark Battle, and its schedule was similar to last year's Dark Battle. It was jointly released by Disney and Firefly. On the other hand, Basic Instinct was scheduled to be released in mid-July. Not only was the production cycle of this movie longer, but because of the theme, it was scheduled to be released at the end of the summer. It was the middle of April, and all the preparations for Ghost were completed. Eric also planned to shoot a few scenes that required special effects, and let the digital domain handle it. According to the plan, he would soon go to New York to shoot. However, the reason why he still could not go to New York on April 13th was because of Basic Instinct. The main lead and director of this movie needed to be decided by him personally. Back then, Eric had considered that the actresses in the United States were relatively more conservative. For famous actresses, it would not be easy for them to act in such a large-scale movie. Moreover, the female lead of Basic Instinct, Catherine, was not a flower vase, and the requirements for her acting skills were more stringent. In his memory, although Basic Instinct was a big production, many famous actresses rejected it. In the end, the production team used the not-so-famous Sharon Stone. Therefore, Eric locked his eyes on actresses from Europe. Compared to Hollywood actresses, European actresses were much bolder. This was just a matter of perception. After all, in most European movies, even if it was completely unnecessary, they still had to take off some clothes. It was as if the director felt that it was not considered a movie if they did not take off some clothes. In such an environment, the actresses had to take the initiative to adapt. Therefore, the scale of Basic Instinct was nothing to many European actresses. Chapter 322. Eric, take a look. The situation is not what you think it is. Carol Baguette, Natasha Kinski, Isabelle Huber, and Isabella Connie, these European A-list actresses have either rejected the invitation or are very interested in the story. However, I hope that you can remove as much of the revealing scenes as possible. In the office, Jeffrey handed a stack of emails to Eric and said. Eric took them and silently checked the replies one by one. After a while, he shook his head and smiled bitterly. It seems that I really thought too simply. Of course, it is very difficult to get an A-list actress with good acting skills to act in Basic Instinct. Even for these European actresses, although they can accept the standard of this movie, if they are interested in developing their career in Hollywood, they will not easily accept this kind of movie. Otherwise, It will have a great impact on their image in Hollywood. If they have no intention of developing their career in Hollywood, there is no need to talk about it. Your movie's taste does not suit most of the European actresses who are used to acting in literary films. By the way, Eric suddenly looked down at the emails in his hand. Carol Bouquet's agent replied that she is very interested in this movie. Contact her and see if you can get her to fly to Los Angeles for a face-to-face discussion. Jeffrey looked at Carol Bouquet's information and smiled. Eric, the image of this French actress is indeed the most compatible with Catherine Choumet's setting. However, she just won the Best Actress award in France in March this year. It will be even more difficult to convince her. Eric thought for a moment. He could also imagine the other party's concerns. He said, then pack her up. I happen to have a female lead role in a movie in my plan. It is also a big production. The investment will not be less than $60 million. How come I don't know? Jeffrey was suddenly interested. Tell me, what is the plan? Eric smiled and shook his head. I will keep this a secret for now. Moreover, it may not be my next movie. I have already asked Stan and the others to do the special effects for Ghost and prepare the early technical development for Jurassic Park. Therefore, my specific work arrangements after Ghost have not been decided yet. Maybe I will start preparing for Jurassic Park, or maybe I will shoot some other simple special effects movies to accumulate experience. Okay, then I won't ask, Jeffrey said. However, Disney is very dissatisfied with the progress of Ghost. They hope you can start shooting as soon as possible, Eric said in a relaxed tone. It's not that they don't know my shooting speed. Although this movie will use special effects, they are not too complicated. I will shoot the parts that need special effects first and let Stan and the others do the post-production. It won't take a month. According to the plan, it will be completed in mid-June. There is still nearly a month of promotion time. It should be enough. I told them the same thing. Jeffrey smiled and said, however, Eric, I think we still have to prepare a backup plan. Many second and third-tier local actresses have handed in their information. You can choose from them. I think there are still many good ones. Then when you leave, give me a copy of their information. I will choose and arrange a simple audition, Eric said. As the two of them were talking, Jeffrey's assistant knocked on the door and said, Mr. Hanson, Mr. Williams, Mr. Roger Spottywood, and Mr. Don Johnson are here. Let's go over, Jeffrey said to Eric. Finally, the director and the male lead have been confirmed. Eric and Jeffrey went to a small reception room together. The three people in the room quickly stood up. Eric was a little surprised to see Melanie Griffith here, but he was soon relieved. Melanie Griffith was Don Johnson's wife. The reason Eric knew about this couple was not because they had any outstanding works. Although the two of them had some works in Hollywood and many of them had good box office sales, they spent most of their time in the TV industry. It was because of their daughter, Dakota Johnson, who would play the female lead in 50 Shades of Grey. To be honest, Don Johnson had always been a TV actor. In terms of fame, he was far less famous than his wife, Melanie Griffith. Melanie Griffith was probably here to cheer her husband on. The two of them had only been married for a little more than a year, and were still in their honeymoon phase. Eric only chose Don Johnson as the male lead of Basic Instinct because of a movie in his memory. As for the original Michael Douglas, Eric felt that he was too old. Although his acting was good, Eric always felt that he was a little weak. He did not fully portray a hot-tempered inspector like Eric. Shaking hands with the couple, Eric suddenly thought of another person. According to the timeline, Eric's rebirth should not have affected this person's appearance. That person was Don Johnson and Melanie Griffith's daughter, Dakota Johnson. In the parallel timeline, Dakota Johnson starred in a very famous movie called 50 Shades of Grey. Speaking of which, Melanie Griffith's family could be considered a Hollywood film family. However, in terms of influence, they were far from the Coppola family or the Fonda family. Mr. Williams, is there a problem? Don Johnson asked curiously when he saw Eric looking at the couple with interest. Oh, sorry. I suddenly remembered something. Eric smiled and turned to the other person, Roger Spottywood. He was a middle-aged man in his 40s with a thin face and glasses. In his previous life, his most famous movie was 007, Tomorrow's Empire. But now, although Roger Spottywood was already 45 years old, he was not very popular as a director. He did not have any outstanding movies. After Jeffrey recommended him, Eric specially looked for his movies and found that he was very good at dramas like Basic Instinct. More importantly, Roger Spottywood was not only cheap, but he also did not ask for the final editing rights. Therefore, Eric quickly decided. After greeting each other, the three of them sat down. "Mr. Spottywood, you have been studying the script for a few days. Tell me your thoughts on this movie." "Of course, Mr. Williams." Roger Spottywood nodded and said, "I feel that Instinct is on the surface, a description of the investigation process of a murder case, but in fact, it's a depiction of a primitive fishing net, a wild emotion. From the script, it can be seen that Inspector Nick is actually the same kind of person as the murderer, Catherine Shumay. Deep in their hearts, they both have the most primitive inclination for destruction. Therefore, in the process of Nick's undercover work, he accidentally killed an innocent tourist in his agitation. Moreover, after the rock singer was killed, Nick was sure that Catherine Shumay was the real murderer from the beginning. After the interrogation, Nick was provoked by Catherine Shumay, which stimulated the fishing net deep in his heart. That was why he was so violent to Beth. Although Roger Spottywood had been a director for 10 years and had not been very popular, he had put in a lot of effort to understand the script. Everyone in the meeting room nodded as they listened. Eric also realized that Roger Spottywood was probably the same as Jonathan Demme. Jonathan Demme became famous because of Eric's Island Horror, and was now a first-tier director in Hollywood. Roger Spottywood probably wanted to seize this opportunity. Although the script of Basic Instinct was very different from other scripts of Eric's movies, it was still a script written by Eric himself. Even if there was a controversy in the future, the criticism would definitely be on Eric. As long as this movie was a success, he would be able to take another step forward as a director. The few of them discussed all aspects of the filming of Basic Instinct for the whole afternoon. After work, Eric returned to the Sharp Corner Manor with a thick stack of candidate actress files. He pushed open the door and walked into the villa. A petite figure greeted him. "Hi, Vicky. When did you come back?" Eric asked as he hugged the girl and kissed her. "I got off the plane at 10:30 in the morning. It felt terrible. I don't want to take such a long flight again," Virginia complained as she held onto Eric's arm. The girl had gone to Europe to attend a film award ceremony. She had wanted to invite Eric, but Eric could not make time. Besides, if he had to attend all the awards himself, he would definitely be exhausted. Jonathan Demme was busy filming The Silence of the Lambs. In the end, they could only let Virginia make the trip. "Actually, I hate taking long-distance flights too. The experience in Venice was terrible," Eric said with a smile. "Since you're back, stay here. I'm going to New York in a few days. Help me look after the house." "I'm not going to help you look after the house," the girl said reproachfully. "By the way, in the afternoon, a person named Michael Klaus sent a sample of your new book. I've read it. The story is really well written, but it's a little short," Virginia said and left for a while. A moment later, she came back with a hardcover book. Eric had specially instructed her to design the cover. In the middle of the green stream of numbers, the words, "The Matrix," were written. Eric looked at the cover and nodded. "Not bad. I didn't expect it to be published so soon." Eric walked to the sofa in the living room and sat down. Then he flipped open the book. Virginia quietly put away Eric's coat and office bag before walking over and sitting down next to the man. Eric naturally put his arm around Virginia's waist. Virginia giggled a few times before lying down on the sofa and using Eric's thigh as a pillow. "Have you decided on your next movie?" Eric asked casually. Virginia shook her head and said, "Not yet. I've received a lot of scripts, and they're all horror movies. Scary Island just ended. If I continue to act in horror movies, it'll be difficult for me to change my genre in the future. So, I want to try other genres." As the girl spoke, she opened the book in front of her and looked at Eric with sparkling eyes. "Okay, I'll keep an eye out for you," Eric said casually. Virginia nodded and said, "Well, why don't you help me write another script?" Eric smiled and gently pinched the girl's face. You're really greedy. Are you going to act in Basic Instinct? Virginia happened to see the script for Basic Instinct. She glared at Eric and said provocatively, I'll act if you want me to. Eric pretended to be angry and glared at her. Okay, get up, Eric said helplessly. You're despicable. You're not considerate at all, Virginia complained, but she quickly got up. I don't have a script that's suitable for you for the time being, so you should try to ask Kapoor to help you pick one. Otherwise, you can find some for me to look at, Eric explained. Seeing the girl nod, he continued. By the way, help me get my briefcase. I still have some things to deal with. It's time to get off work now, the girl said. She got up and took the briefcase. Eric took out a stack of actress documents and placed them on his lap. He flipped through them one by one, and from time to time he would pick out a good one and put it aside. What are these for? Virginia asked curiously as she picked up a document and looked at it. The list of actresses for Basic Instinct, Eric said. Almost all the A-list actresses in Europe have rejected it. The A-list actresses in Hollywood basically won't accept it. I can only choose from the B-list actresses. Actually, many of the B-list and B-list actresses have good acting skills. Of course. However, I don't have time to pick pearls in the sand now. If I can use the A-list actresses, of course, I will try my best to use them. This way, there will be a certain guarantee in the box office. Virginia sighed softly. Soon, she felt that she was really lucky. Eric, then I'll leave you to work. I'm going to make dinner. What do you want to eat? Anything. You can make whatever you want, Eric said without looking up. The girl knew that Eric was telling the truth. Eric had never been picky about food, so she stood up and walked to the kitchen. Eric was halfway through choosing when the phone behind him rang. Eric got up and picked up the cordless phone. Jeffrey's voice came from the other end. Jeffrey, what's the matter? On the other end of the phone, Jeffrey spoke for a while. Eric thought for a while and said, Okay, let's talk over the phone. Give my phone number to Carol Baguette. No problem. I'll hang up then. Eric pressed the hang-up button and put the cordless phone on the coffee table in front of him. He continued to choose the list of actresses in front of him. More than 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. Eric picked it up, and a female voice with somewhat poor English pronunciation came from the other end. Hello, Mr. Williams. I'm Carol Baguette. Half an hour later, Virginia came out of the kitchen to call Eric to eat. She saw that Eric was still holding the phone in his hand and walking around the open space by the floor-to-ceiling window. He was gesticulating and saying something. She did not dare to disturb him. After a while, Virginia saw that Eric had hung up the phone. He threw the cordless phone on the sofa and threw himself on the sofa, looking very tired. The girl walked to Eric and asked considerately, What's wrong? Nothing. I invited a French actress, Carol Baguette. I wanted her to star in Basic Instinct, but she rejected it. Virginia wanted to gloat a little. She did not expect that there would be an actress that Eric could not invite. However, when she saw Eric's anxious look on the sofa, she quickly controlled her emotions and comforted him. Then take your time to choose. It's not like no one wants to act anyway. Carol Baguette, the spokesperson for Chanel No. 5 a few years ago? Yes. She also acted as a Bond girl. Eric nodded and said, I remember a little. I heard that she was a very unique woman. After she acted as a Bond girl, she did not want to continue being a vase, so she went back to France to act in literary films. Let's not talk about her. If she rejected it, then so be it, Eric said dejectedly. Anyway, most Hollywood movies were like this. There were endless twists and turns in the casting process. Even Steven Spielberg and James Cameron were no exception. He remembered that in his previous life, Cameron spent a few months convincing Fox to let Leonardo play the role of Jack in Titanic. Then let's eat first, Virginia said. Eric nodded and stood up to walk to the dining room. It was already past 10 o'clock at night. Virginia was still in her pajamas as she watched Eric pacing back and forth, while making a phone call to the list in his hand. I don't care. I've already given them enough time by not scheduling it for tomorrow morning. If they can't make it, then I can only say that it's a pity. Tomorrow, I'll confirm the female lead for Basic Instinct. Yes, on the spot. New York just called me an hour ago. Royce and the others have been waiting in New York for a week. The 2 leads have already gone over, so I can't waste any more time. Eric let out a long sigh and hung up the phone. He put the phone on the phone stand and collapsed on the bed, exhausted. Virginia's small hands gently massaged Eric's temples. She said softly, "Eric, do you have to be in such a hurry? You are already so outstanding. Why do you have to tire yourself out?" These were originally planned for the first half of the year. Unfortunately, because of the incident at the beginning of the year, I wasted more than 3 months. That's why it's like this now, Eric explained in a weak tone. I always feel that time is too tight. I want to do too much. I really wish I could help you. Unfortunately, I don't know how to do anything, Virginia said softly. Eric smiled and hugged the girl's waist tighter. Actually, you can help me. Be my big pillow. I like to hug women to sleep. Just hug to sleep? The girl asked. She reached out and turned off the lights in the bedroom. The room suddenly became dark. Because the soundproofing was very good, although there was wind outside, there was no sound of waves. The surroundings were silent. Yes, just hug to sleep, Eric murmured. Unknowingly, his eyelids began to droop and he quickly fell asleep. The girl was stunned for a while before she tenderly pulled the blanket over the 2 of them. In the Firefly audition room, a woman in a simple coat sat down on a chair. She crossed her long legs with a relaxed expression and took out a cigarette from her pocket. There was always a faint, indifferent smile on her face. "You can't smoke here, Miss Chu Mei," the assistant behind the camera said. The girl glanced at the assistant's seat flirtatiously and said, "What are you going to do? Sue me for smoking?" After the girl finished speaking, she lit the cigarette, took a puff, and exhaled a faint green smoke. After a short silence, the assistant said again, "Can you tell me about your relationship with Mr. Bartz?" "I've been in a relationship with him for more than a year. He's not afraid to try new things. I like that kind of man. He can give me a lot of happiness," the woman said as she smoked a cigarette. She didn't hide her private affairs. "Have you played civvy before?" The assistant asked again. The girl maintained her smile. "You guessed right. Do you know how to tie him up?" "No." "Have you never tied him up?" "No." The girl denied again. "Johnny likes to use his hands. I like his hands." After the girl said this line, the assistant was about to continue when Eric interrupted. "Okay, let's stop here." The girl sitting on the chair suddenly looked disappointed. At the same time, she was a little resentful. The Firefly gave her too little time to prepare. She received the audition invitation in the morning and rushed over. She had less than an hour to prepare. However, although she was resentful, the girl didn't dare to reveal it in front of the young man. Otherwise, there would be no hope. "Mr. Williams, I think I can try again." "No need," Eric said. "Miss Nelson, although your appearance is very suitable for the role of Catherine Chu Mei, I can't see much of Catherine's aura from your performance. You were too restrained just now, as if you were carefully walking on a single plank bridge. I understand that this may be because you didn't have enough time to prepare. However, the most fatal point is that I didn't see the potential in you. The potential to release the aura of a woman like Catherine. So I can only say sorry," Eric explained patiently. Although the girl was still a little unsatisfied, she didn't ask for anything else. She stood up and thanked him, then opened the door and left dejectedly. After the girl left, Jeffrey couldn't help but say, "Eric, I think your emotions are not right. You're too impatient. Why don't we rest for half an hour, and give the actresses another half an hour to prepare? Anyway, there are only 11 people left. We have enough time to finish the audition." Eric sighed and looked at his watch. There was indeed enough time. He had already eliminated 8 people on the spot. If this continued, he wouldn't get anything today. The female lead role of Basic Instinct would continue to be stranded. "Tell them to rest for half an hour." Eric stood up and said to Jeffrey, "I'm going out to get some fresh air." "Okay, go ahead." Jeffrey nodded. Eric opened the door and went out. The girls who were sitting on the bench in the corridor and waiting for the audition couldn't help but stand up when they saw him come out. Rest for half an hour. You can go to the conference room over there to prepare again, Eric said to the girls, then walked to the other side of the corridor. The remaining girls looked at each other. A few of them were eager to chase after him, but in the end, they didn't move. Eric came to the bathroom at the end of the corridor. Just as he was about to go in and wash his face, a girl suddenly walked out and happened to bump into Eric. Because she lost her balance, she fell to the ground. Eric also took a step back. The girl was a little angry at first. When she saw that it was Eric, she stood up in a panic. "I'm sorry, Mr. Williams. I didn't do it on purpose." "It's okay. It's my fault." Eric shook his head and looked at the girl opposite him who had very special eyes. He said, "You're Joanna Pakula?" The girl's eyes lit up, and she quickly nodded. "Yes, Mr. Williams. I didn't expect you to know me. By the way, the audition over there. Rest for half an hour. You can prepare more," Eric said. His heart moved slightly and he said, "Miss Pakula, can you say it again?" "What?" When the girl heard that the audition was suspended, she didn't intend to go back. She keenly felt that this was a good opportunity. "It's the first sentence you said just now." Joanna Pakula thought for a while. Although she didn't understand what he meant, she still said, "I'm sorry." "Yes, that's it. Say it a few times." Eric leaned against the wall in the corner, lowered his head, and took out a cigarette and lit it. When Joanna Pakula heard Eric asking her to apologize repeatedly, she suddenly felt nervous. "Mr. Williams, I really didn't do it on purpose." "No, it's not that sentence." Eric shook his head and said, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." The girl clenched the small red leather bag in her hand tightly, and repeated it repeatedly. She felt that the young director in front of her was really abominable. She just accidentally bumped into him, and he tortured her like this. For a moment, Joanna Pakula felt that today's role would definitely not be hers. She wanted to summon up the courage to leave in a huff, but there was still a trace of expectation in her heart. "Okay, stop." Eric finally interrupted the girl's repetition. "Your accent is wrong. It doesn't sound good. I saw your information last night. You're from Poland and used to be an actress in the Polish National Theater?" "Yes." The girl nodded. "Why did you come to the United States? A national theater is better than being a third-rate actress in Hollywood, right?" Joanna Pakula was silent for a moment before saying, "Because of Zhengji." Eric nodded and did not ask any more questions. He was not interested in Zhengji at all. He carefully looked at Joanna Pakula in front of him. She was the same age as Sharon Stone, the heroine of the original version of Instinct. However, Sharon Stone looked much older than the girl in front of him. Some people would even believe that the girl was in her early 20s. "I really couldn't tell that you're already 33 years old," Eric said with emotion. Joanna Pakula's expression was a little gloomy. Women always did not like to pay attention to their age. Moreover, thinking about the situation she had been in all these years, she really felt a little sad. In 1980, because of the national turmoil in Poland, she was put under house arrest. It was not easy for her to emigrate to the United States. The man who helped her emigrate did not care about her anymore. Instead, he married another woman. All these years, she had been drifting alone in Hollywood, feeling like a lonely ghost. Although she had played the female lead in a low-budget horror film last year, the film had only earned a pitiful box office of more than 1 million yuan, which did not bring any improvement to her career. The more Joanna Pakula thought about it, the sadder and sadder she felt. She glanced at the man in front of her. It was obviously his fault just now, but she had to apologize repeatedly. He was so hateful. The girl suddenly felt that the whole world was bullying her. Unknowingly, her eyes were filled with tears. What's wrong with you?" Eric was at a loss when he saw Joanna Pakula's tears. He searched in his pocket and finally found a piece of tissue. "Don't cry." Joanna Pakula nodded her head. The girl took the tissue and wiped her eyes. However, the more she wiped, the sadder she became. Gradually, she could not help but choke with sobs. "You abominable Americans. Back then, that bastard sent me to the United States and left me alone. You are also a bastard. I just accidentally bumped into you and you bullied me like that. You bastards all bullied me." Eric raised his hand in a panic. Seeing that the girl was nagging with an accent that was not very standard, he finally gradually became impatient. He raised his voice and said, "Okay, stop." The girl's voice faltered. She wiped her tears and sobered up a little. Suddenly, she realized the situation she was in. Soon she regretted it. This opportunity was completely ruined. When the girl stopped crying, Eric asked, "By the way, I didn't see it clearly last night. Why do you want to act in this movie?" "What? I mean, instinct," Eric continued. "What's wrong with that?" Joanna Pakula asked softly, puzzled. Eric thought for a while and said, "I don't want you to act in this movie. You should act in more mainstream movies. Since you can join the Polish National Theater, your acting skills must be good." "Do you think I don't want to act in mainstream movies?" Joanna Pakula said. "But where can I get such an opportunity? I have participated in many auditions, but I have never succeeded. They always find all kinds of reasons to reject me. I can't compete with local actors." Eric thought for a while and said, "How about this? You don't participate in today's audition." Chapter 323. Then Joanna Pakula realized something, but found it hard to believe. After all, it was the first time she had met Eric. Eric continued, "Even if you attended the audition, your image doesn't fit the role of Catherine Chume at all. I need an actress with an imposing aura, and you are more suitable to play the role of a gentle and virtuous wife. To be honest, you look a little different in person from the photo I saw last night. Otherwise, you would have been eliminated last night." Joanna Pakula was a little embarrassed. The photo was specially taken for this role at the suggestion of her agent. Because of the angle, her face shape in the photo was more square against her long hair, which made her temperament more fierce. Although Eric didn't point it out, the girl still felt a little embarrassed. Eric didn't intend to pursue the matter. Many actors used much more aggressive means to get the role. Compared to that, Joanna Pakula's little tricks in the photo were not worth mentioning at all. "How about this? Give me your contact information. If there is a suitable role in the future, I will inform you," Eric said quickly. Joanna Pakula raised her head and looked at Eric. Then she lowered her eyes again, and her slender hand holding the bag rubbed the leather uneasily. She had heard the kind of promise that Eric had just made from many people. Most of them were perfunctory words without any follow-up. After that, there was no follow-up. Eric noticed the girl's little movements and quickly realized the inappropriateness of his words. This promise was no different from those perfunctory words. Eric didn't deny that the first time he saw Joanna Pakula, he was interested in this woman who exuded a gentle temperament from head to toe. Moreover, although it was a little unreasonable, Eric really liked Joanna Pakula's accent when she said, "I'm sorry." The somewhat short flat-tongued hair was like a finger inadvertently plucking the string at the bottom of his heart. Therefore, what he had just said was certainly not perfunctory. But obviously, Joanna Pakula didn't think so. She was obviously a very insecure woman. In fact, it was easy to understand. She was a stranger in a foreign land, and her personal career was very bumpy. From what she had just said, it seemed that she had been hurt in love. It was certain that she was insecure. "Miss Pakula, how about this? I'll treat you to dinner tonight, and we can have a good chat, if you don't think it's a little abrupt?" The girl's expression instantly became more hesitant. Eric quickly added, "You choose the place, I'm fine with anything." Then, "Well, maybe my cooking skills are not bad. Mr. Williams, how about?" Eric raised his eyebrows and realized what the girl wanted to say. "Of course, no problem. But is it convenient to go to your house? I mean, won't your husband or boyfriend misunderstand?" The girl shook her head sadly. "I'm single now. It's good to be single." Eric immediately echoed in his heart. As the two were chatting, footsteps came from the corridor. Soon Eric's assistant, Alan, came around the corner and saw Eric and Joanna Pakula standing together. He stopped in surprise, not knowing whether to continue walking. "What's the matter, Alan?" Eric saw his assistant and asked casually. Alan pointed to the bathroom door behind Eric, and then immediately shook his head. "No, nothing, I'll go over there." After that, the assistant walked quickly and left without looking back. Both of them couldn't help but chuckle at Alan's reaction. "That's my assistant. He must have misunderstood something," Eric explained, and then said, "Why don't you wait in my office first? I may need a few more hours." Joanna Pakula nodded obediently. Eric took the girl to the elevator all the way to the top floor and brought her into his office. He pushed open another door in the office, turned his head and said, "There's a TV here, you can—" Joanna Pakula saw the big picture in the lounge and shook her head hesitantly. She pointed to the lounge area with a set of sofas near the desk. "I'll wait there." "Okay then." Eric didn't insist. "There are magazines in the bookcase. You can do whatever you want. I'll go down first." 2 hours later, in the audition room, the remaining actresses had finished their auditions. Eric, Jeffrey, and the director of Instinct, Roger Spottywood, gathered together to discuss the final result. Kelly Lynch's audition was the best, and her image was good. However, she doesn't have much acting experience, so it's hard to be sure if her long performance can be brought into the shooting. As for the other one, although Diane Lane's performance just now was a little worse, I think she's more malleable. Besides, her acting skills definitely won't be a problem. Otherwise, Francis Coppola wouldn't have chosen her to star in The Cotton Club. Besides, she already played a similar role in Perfume of a Dangerous Woman last year. I think it's safer to choose her, Roger Spottywood said as he looked at Eric. On the other side, Jeffrey didn't express any opinions at all. However, it wasn't hard to see from his nodding from time to time that Jeffrey agreed with Roger's point of view. Eric sighed and said, "Diana Lane's appearance is still a little soft." "Eric, you don't have to worry about this at all. As long as you put a little more effort into the makeup, you can even mold her into a man," Roger said again. Eric looked around and stared at Alan. "Find a few stylists in half an hour. Do you want the best?" Alan was stunned and immediately nodded. "Of course, no problem. I'll contact them now." After the assistant finished speaking, he hurriedly left the audition room. Eric thought for a moment and said to another staff member, "Contact Mr. Don Johnson and ask him to come here in an hour. I need him to rehearse the lines with the female lead to see the effect." Hearing Eric's order, the staff member nodded and left the room. Eric closed the documents in front of him and said, "Okay, inform the actresses that Mississippi Diana Lane will stay. The others can leave." The staff in the audition room quickly moved to dismantle the camera equipment, organize the documents, and tidy up the seats. As Eric spoke, he led the main creators of Instinct out of the audition room. Chapter 324. Half an hour later, in another dressing room, Deanne Ryan was sitting on a chair with excitement and nervousness, allowing the makeup artist to quickly touch up her eyebrows and hairstyle. Several staff members were circling around her, and Eric, who was at the periphery, was giving pointers to the makeup artist from time to time. This situation made Deanne Ryan realize that she was really going to get the female lead role in Basic Instinct. Although the scale of this movie was a bit too big, it would definitely have a great impact on her screen image in the future. However, this was Eric Williams' movie. Although Eric was not the director and was only the producer, his name was Eric's screenwriter. No one would think of this movie as someone else's work. Thinking of the female leads who had become famous because of Eric's movies, Deanne Ryan could not help but feel a little excited. "Mr. Williams, do you think this is okay?" The stylist quickly swept Deanne Ryan's face with a brush, then straightened up and asked. Eric walked in front of the girl, looked at her carefully, and shook his head. "No, the eyebrows need to be thicker and straighter. The lips are too sexy. I don't want that." "Do you want it to be more masculine?" the stylist asked tentatively. "Of course not. The female lead must be a woman, but not a sexy one." The stylist frowned and thought for a while. As the best stylist in the industry, he had seen all kinds of weird requests from many famous directors. Therefore, he did not feel impatient with Eric's words. After a while, the stylist quickly retouched Deanne Ryan's face. The girl's eyebrows were thicker, and her sexy upper lip was lightly touched up. After finishing, the stylist looked at Eric again tentatively. Eric nodded slightly, then looked behind him. "Have you cut out the clothes I just drew?" "Right away," a staff member answered. 3 minutes. "Hurry up." Eric shouted, then looked at Diane Ryan. Mr. Tang Johnson will be here later. I need you to perform a few more scenes. Go and get ready. Diane Lane carefully stood up, as though he was afraid of messing up his newly styled hairstyle. He nodded and took a few pages of lines from the staff. He walked to the sofa in the corner and sat down. He quietly flipped through them as the noisy crowd around him couldn't help but lower their voices. Mr. Williams, the clothes are ready. The assistant brought over a white dress and showed it to Eric. Is it okay? It's okay. Eric took it, walked to the sofa, and handed the dress to the girl. He said to Diane Ryan, go and change. Wear this dress and experience Catherine Chumey's mentality. Although you have a good chance, if the effect is not good, I don't mind changing. No problem. The girl nodded. Although Eric's invitation for a vacuum audition was a little awkward, the girl didn't refuse. She took the clothes and walked to the fitting room. You just said that you like men to use their hands, didn't you? Tang Johnson asked aggressively. Diane Ryan had a faint confident smile on his face. He calmly retorted. No, I mean I like Johnny to use his hands. I don't make rules, Nick. I like to let nature take its course. You killed Mr. Bartz, right? An assistant read out the line. The girl leaned forward and said with slight mockery, I'm not stupid enough to kill someone with the method in my book, and then announce that I'm the murderer. I'm not an idiot. We know you're not that stupid. Maybe that's how you can get away with it. Write a book as an excuse, Tang Johnson said again. Diane Ryan immediately looked at Tang Johnson with a smile. Of course that's good. The girl said with a smile, but she quickly became serious, as if what she had said was just a joke. She looked at the people opposite her and said, I said I didn't kill him. Did you take drugs with Mr. Bartz? Of course. Which kind? Keika, Nick, have you smoked keika before? The girl looked at Don Johnson again and asked calmly. After that, the scene was silent for a moment. The scene in Basic Instinct, that people love to talk about, appeared in the audition room. Diane Ryan was clearly in the zone. She couldn't help but follow the script that she had just read and changed her legs. Jeffrey, who was sitting opposite her and drinking water, saw the scene in front of him and immediately spat out the water in his mouth. With this interruption, Diane Ryan was also out of character. She raised her hand to cover the corner of her skirt, but there wasn't much embarrassment on her face. Instead, she looked boldly at Eric, who was sitting opposite her. Eric must have seen under her skirt just now. Eric coughed twice. He was very satisfied that Diane Ryan could completely let go. Therefore, Eric quickly said, very good. Congratulations, Ms. Diane Ryan. You've passed the audition. Thank you for your recognition, Mr. Williams. I will definitely work hard. The girl straightened up and thanked him in a reserved manner. Eric nodded and then said to Roger Spottywood, since the female lead has been confirmed, I will rush to New York tomorrow. This movie will be handed over to you and Jeffrey. According to the normal shooting schedule, this movie will take 3 months to complete, but I hope you can reduce the production period to 2 months. Because the movie will be released in 3 months, we need to reserve a month for publicity. I'll try my best. Roger Spottywood nodded. I don't want to hear words like, try your best. I need a 100% guarantee. The budget of this movie can be increased appropriately. What I need is to complete it on time and ensure the quality of the movie. Roger Spottywood felt a sense of pressure, but when he thought of Eric's movie, he still had to complete Ghost first. It was said that the movie still needed special effects, but Basic Instinct didn't need them. He had been in Hollywood for so many years. He couldn't be worse than a young man. I promise, I will complete it on time, Roger Spottywood said quickly without hesitation. Eric nodded and reached out to shake hands with Roger Spottywood. He said, this is also something I have to do. Roger, you know, I wasted a few months at the beginning of the year. I have to rush back and show some people that they can't hinder me at all. So, if you can finish this movie, we can definitely continue to cooperate in the future. Chapter 325. After confirming the female lead, he had a small meeting with the creator of Instinct to finalize some miscellaneous matters. It was already past 7 in the afternoon. Eric was about to leave when he remembered that there was a woman in his office. Eric pushed open the office door and walked in. The little woman who was sitting on the sofa, absent-mindedly flipping through the magazine in front of her, was startled. Seeing that it was Eric, she breathed a sigh of relief. At this time, all the lights in the office were turned on. The wall lamp, the ceiling lamp, and even the desk lamp on Eric's desk were turned on. "Why do you turn on so many lights?" Eric asked casually and walked to the desk. "No, nothing." Joanna Pakula hurriedly stepped forward and turned off the desk lamp on the desk. Then, she quickly went to turn off the wall lamp. The office suddenly became much darker. Seeing Joanna Pakula turn off the lights, Eric quickly understood that the reason why the girl turned on so many lights was because she was insecure. Maybe she was afraid of being alone. While feeling pity for her, Eric's tone also became gentle. "Sorry, Miss Pakula, for keeping you waiting so late. But I really have a lot of things to do." Joanna Pakula shook her head. "It's okay. Anyway, I have nothing else to do. How about I don't go to your place tonight? It's too late now," Eric said. The girl's insecure behavior just now made him feel guilty, as if he was taking advantage of her. "No, it's not too late. It's only past 7, Joanna Pakula said a little anxiously. Although she inevitably realized something in her heart, the girl instinctively did not want to give up this opportunity. She had had enough of these uncertain days, and the young man in front of her was obviously able to help her end all of this. She did not ask for too much. She just wanted to settle down and not be like before, where she did not get any roles for the longest period of 3 years. She had to rely on temporary jobs to make a living. "In that case, let's go." Eric did not refuse. When they arrived at the parking lot, Eric did not drive his own car. Instead, he sat directly in the passenger seat of Joanna Pakula's car. The woman looked at Eric, who was fastening his seatbelt, took a deep breath, and started the car. "I didn't expect you to live in North Hollywood. My home used to be nearby, so it should be in the north," Eric said after entering Joanna Pakula's small apartment. Speaking of which, the original apartment in North Howley had been sold. However, the mansion in Beverly Hills was not sold. It was used as another residence. Although there was a property tax every year, the property tax in North America could offset part of the personal income tax, so it was not too much. Joanna Pakula said, "Actually, I just moved here not long ago. I used to live in the city, but I moved here after earning some money from that movie last year." Eric shrugged slightly and did not say anything. Obviously, the woman's previous situation was not very good. The city center of Los Angeles was not as prosperous as the city center of the country in his previous life. Instead, it was a very chaotic community. The Beverly Hills area had the best security in Los Angeles, and the downtown area had the worst security. "Mr. Williams, you take a rest first. I'll go and make dinner. It won't take long." Joanna Pakula pointed to the small sofa in the living room and said, "Well, just call me Eric," Eric said as he took off his coat casually and hung it on the hanger at the entrance. "Okay, Eric. My friends call me Joan," Joanna Pakula said as she walked to the kitchen. Eric looked around the small apartment. It was 1 bedroom and 1 living room. The decoration and furniture were quite simple. There was a sofa in the middle of the living room. In front of the sofa was a small TV cabinet. Behind the sofa was a small dining table against the wall. There were a few photos hanging on the wall. Eric leaned over to take a look. Some of them were probably stage stills from Shakespeare's plays. Joanna Pakula looked very young in the photos. Thinking back to the woman's time in the Polish National Theater, these photos should be from that time. These photos should be from more than 10 years ago. However, in comparison, the current Joanna Pakula did not look much different from more than 10 years ago. Compared to the Westerners who aged easily, the woman's appearance showed that she wanted to enjoy God's favor. After walking around, Eric walked to the small TV and saw a VCR under the TV cabinet. There were a few videotapes next to it. Eric casually flipped through them and saw a movie called Kiss. The introduction said that it was a horror film. Half of the woman's face on the poster was made into a skeleton with thick red lipstick. She did not look like the woman who was busy in the kitchen at all. Putting the videotape into the VCR and turning on the TV, Eric sat back on the sofa. The scene began with the parting of a divorced family. A mother and a daughter boarded a train that was going far away. But on the train, the mother's evil spirit acted up. But the evil spirit in the mother's body spread to the daughter and she died. The daughter sneaked off the train and disappeared. More than 10 years later, the sister who grew up with the father had a family and the daughter was an adult. But because the mother took off the protective cross and gave it to the daughter, the sister died in a sudden car accident. The sister, who had never shown up, appeared at the sister's grave and met the sister's husband and daughter. After only watching for half an hour, Eric could almost foresee the result. There was a slight sound behind him. Joanna Pakula had appeared in the living room without him noticing. She stood quietly behind Eric and stared at the TV screen in a daze. "I don't like this movie," Eric said as he stepped forward to turn off the VCR and change the channel. The woman did not answer, but the sadness in her eyes could not be concealed. If she had a choice, she would definitely not accept such a movie. "Eric, let's eat," the woman said after a moment of silence. "Well, let me help you." Eric got up and followed Joanna Pakula into the kitchen to help the woman put the simple dinner on the table. "I don't have any ingredients here. This is all I can do," Joanna Pakula explained. Eric scooped a small bowl of corn soup for himself. After tasting it, he nodded and praised, "It's very good. I like it very much." Joanna Pakula looked at the somewhat shabby dishes on the table and regretted. If she had known, she would have taken Eric out to eat. In fact, it would not have cost too much. Although the man kept praising her, she was still very unconfident and her smile was very forced. Chapter 326. Although Eric tried his best to liven up the atmosphere was slightly awkward because of the girl's absent-mindedness. After dinner, Eric looked at the girl who was quietly cleaning up the tableware. After thinking for a while, he stood up and said, "Joan, it's getting late. I think I should go back." "You didn't drive here. How are you going to go back?" The girl looked up at Eric and asked casually. It was not easy to find a taxi in this area. Joanna obviously knew that too. Eric coughed awkwardly. When he was about to call someone to pick him up, Joanna Pakula suddenly said, "Can you watch TV for a while?" Eric's expression changed. He nodded slightly and sat back on the sofa obediently. The girl cleaned up the tableware and then went into the bathroom. The small apartment had poor soundproofing. Eric could clearly hear the sound of running water. His heart suddenly throbbed strangely. After a while, the girl walked out of the bathroom in a pink bathrobe. Her wet hair was loose. She turned off the light in the living room. Suddenly, there was only the flickering light of the TV in the living room. Eric watched the girl turn off the TV in silence. After a while, the girl leaned over and said softly, "I've heard about you." Huh? Eric felt that the atmosphere was a bit strange. He subconsciously asked in confusion. Joanna's voice was a bit low. "About you, that's all I have. My request is not high." The sunlight was blocked by a slightly tall building outside the window. It barely squeezed through the gap and squeezed into the narrow bedroom through the curtains. Although it was not too big and made Eric feel a bit uncomfortable, the faint fragrance of a woman lingering in the room combined his feelings very well. Most women's rooms could make people feel a trace of natural warmth. At least, that was what Eric had seen before. A tuft of light brown hair leaned in front of him. The woman was actually very tall, only less than 10 centimeters shorter than Eric. However, at this moment, she curled up in front of Eric like a little girl. Eric could clearly feel the faint warmth of the girl's breath. Eric could clearly feel the woman's insecurity from her posture. Eric wondered if he should get up now. His watch was on the dressing table next to him. He was afraid that his movements would wake the girl up. Because he didn't take it, he didn't know what time it was. However, looking at the sky outside the window, even though the sun was blocked, it was still bright. Eric was very sure that it was definitely not early now. He did not bring his mobile phone with him. Although Motorola had provided him with several microtacs, which were only slightly larger than the palm of his hand, compared to the mobile phones in his previous life, they were still very clumsy, and he did not like to carry them. Many people were probably looking for him anxiously. Joanna Paku, who was in his arms, moved and opened her eyes. She felt that she was curled up in a man's arms. After a short period of confusion, she quickly remembered what had happened last night. "Eric, what time is it?" The girl raised her head and asked timidly. Seeing that the girl had woken up, Eric felt relieved and took a look at his watch. "It's 9:40. Do you want to rest for a while more?" "It's already so late." The girl sighed and shook her head. However, she was not in a hurry to get up. She rested her head on Eric's arm and blinked her beautiful peach blossom eyes at Eric. "You don't want to get up?" Eric asked curiously. The girl shook her head, and her eyes were a little confused. "It's not that I don't want to. I just don't know what to do after I open my eyes every day. That's not good. Without a goal, it's easy to get old." "Oh, I'm indeed much older than you," the girl said disappointedly. Eric comforted her. "You look about the same age as me, at most 25 years old." Joanna smiled and said, "But after all, I'm not 25 years old. Even if I can fool others, I can't fool myself." Eric kissed the girl's lips and said with a smile, "Okay, let's not talk about these sad things." "Yes, Alan, of course I'm fine. I'll go to the airport on time in the afternoon. Go to Malibu and ask someone to help me pack some luggage. Yes, there are people there. You'll know when you get there. Also, buy another ticket." After putting down the phone, Eric looked at the woman who was already dressed neatly. "Come to New York with me. I've already asked someone to buy a ticket." Joanna Pakula was a little hesitant. "You're going to shoot a movie. What am I going to do?" "I've already thought of a position for you. Be my personal assistant." "Personal assistant?" the girl asked in return. After thinking about it, she nodded. "Okay, up to you. I have nothing to do in Los Angeles anyway. But what about my agent? What do you think of your agent?" Eric asked. "He's okay," Joanna said reluctantly. In fact, most agents in Hollywood were very practical. When a star had no potential, the agent would quickly give up on the star. Eric shook his head. "Don't use such an uncertain tone. What I mean is, if you think he's good, you can keep him. If not, you can fire him." Without much thought, Joanna Pakula quickly said, "Then let's fire him." "That's it," Eric said with a smile. "If you call him now, he'll be fired. Then you'll be free. We'll go to New York." Joanna was already a little hesitant. "But personal assistant?" Eric stepped forward and exposed the girl's waist. "Why? You don't want to?" "No, I'm just a little scared," the girl said with flickering eyes. "Scared of what?" Joanna Pakula hesitated and closed her eyes slightly. "I'm scared that you just want to play with me. When you're tired of me, you won't care about me anymore." Eric pretended to be angry and said, "Do you think I'm that kind of person?" "It's precisely because I don't know that I'm scared. I just want to settle down." "You're the big boss of Firefly. Just help me arrange a movie and stabilize my career in Hollywood. This is not a high request. I promise I won't pester you in the future. If you want, you can still come to me." After hearing the girl's nervous words, Eric hugged her tightly in his arms. "Don't worry. You definitely won't be like this in the future. Although you don't believe me, I still promise you that you'll definitely become a big star in Hollywood. In my next movie, I'll let you be the female lead." Chapter 327. In late April, Firefly's 3 movie projects were launched almost at the same time, and the schedule was set for this year's summer. This move violated the normal release cycle of many movies. After all, many Hollywood movies in this era were generally released after a few months to more than a year after production. Therefore, many media outlets questioned Eric's arrangement. However, Eric did not respond to these comments, because Firefly was still very different from the 7 major film companies in terms of operation. After all, Firefly was still a lot smaller than the 7 major film companies. For the major film companies, they had to arrange the release of dozens of movies a year. Of course, some movies would be repeatedly delayed due to various conflicts, but Firefly was different. After the merger with New Line, Robert Shea had suspended the New Line's low-budget production plan. Therefore, Firefly only had 3 movies to arrange for the release of in the first half of the year, which included The Silence of the Lambs, Sleeping with the Enemy, and Ghost. Basic Instinct was being distributed by Universal, so Firefly did not have to worry about it at all. As for Ghost, it was being distributed in cooperation with Disney. Under such circumstances, Firefly's distribution pressure was even lower, and it was easier to operate. Almost at the same time as the movie was being produced, they could start simple promotional work. By the time the movie was released, the publicity had already been going on for 3 months. Compared to the major film companies, which only had a month's publicity time, Firefly's publicity was very sufficient. At the same time as the movie was being filmed, Eric's The Matrix, which was only about 50,000 words, was also quietly sold on the shelves. Michael Klaus spent almost no effort on publicity, and the book easily climbed to the top of the bestseller list. After all, this book had been written too hastily. Eric had only spent a little over a week on it, and many of the details were not considered completely. It was more like he was narrating a lot of specious but actually wrong segments. Therefore, many newspapers criticized Eric's book, saying that although it had an ingenious idea, the details were completely shoddy. It was simply fooling the readers. Some newspapers even criticized Eric for being a money grubber. Even the readers who didn't like this book laughed it off. With Eric's current net worth, why would he care about some insignificant royalties? Of course, many people in Hollywood realized Eric's real purpose for writing this book. Compared to the previous Jurassic Park and Resident Evil, this novel was obviously geared towards the movie industry. Moreover, after carefully studying this novel, many people realized that The Matrix had great potential in the movie industry. Even though they knew that the chances were slim, there was still a constant stream of people contacting the film rights. Even Cameron, who was preparing for Terminator 2, became very interested in the novel. He even called New York to discuss some of his views on The Matrix with Eric. Of course, Cameron was tactful enough to not mention the film rights in the end. Eric also had no intention of letting Cameron direct The Matrix. Although the idea was very tempting and interesting, The Matrix was very different from Cameron's film style. Cameron's films were not lacking in thought. For example, the Terminator series could be said to express a strong concern about mankind's endless expansion of nuclear armaments. In the previous world, Avatar expressed a strong concern about mankind's endless plundering of natural resources through the story of the alien race, the Na-6, defending the planet Pandora. In the end, it expressed a strong concern about mankind's endless plundering of natural resources and the possibility of a strong backlash from nature. However, although there was some thought, Cameron's films had always pursued the most gorgeous visual effects and the most explosive scenes. These were not the main focus of The Matrix. The storm caused by The Matrix continued. No matter what the outside world said, Eric was not affected at all. The shooting of Ghost was carried out in an orderly manner in all districts of New York. Stan, the Grim Reaper I need is a real Grim Reaper with a black cloak and a scythe in his hand, not a few blurry shadows. But according to what you said, the final effect is likely to be a few shadows. Night had just fallen in New York. On a closed street, the crew was busy preparing for the early stages of filming. Eric and Stan, who was in charge of the special effects, were discussing something. Right, speaking of shadows, this is a big problem. Sam has become a ghost, so according to common sense, he shouldn't have a shadow in the end, and he shouldn't have footsteps when he walks. The footsteps are easy to solve, but what about the shadows? Stan pondered for a moment and said, "That's easy. Use shadowless lights, and then adjust the lighting in post-production. But this will be very troublesome to shoot." "I'm not afraid of trouble, as long as you can do the details well," Eric said decisively. At this time, the set supervisor in charge of the set came over and told Eric that everything had been arranged. A few extras wrapped in blue tights came to Eric and Stan. These people were the terrifying Grim Reapers that appeared in the movie. However, not only were they not scary, they looked a little funny. Stan and Eric went up together and personally checked the extras' costumes. "Eric, I don't think the Grim Reaper needs to be too realistic. If it's too realistic, it will become a horror movie. So a few shadows are just right. No, Stan, I'm talking about realistic effects, not terrifying effects. If the Grim Reaper is realistic, wouldn't it be scary? Stan asked with some difficulty. Eric shrugged helplessly. You just need to do it according to the effect I want. I'll take care of the rest. Stan shrugged. Okay, as you wish. Actually, this has to do with post-production rendering. The rendering farm for the digital domain hasn't been set up yet. Then we'll borrow Pixar's. They have a ready-made rendering farm. Although it's used to render 3D animation, I remember that the principle is similar. You can talk to John Lasseter. If it doesn't work, we'll borrow Industrial Light and Magic's. Eric and Stan finished checking the extras and made an okay gesture to the assistant director. Then filming began again. Chapter 328. This was the scene where the villain who killed Sam, Willie Lopez, was frightened by Sam's ghost and ran out of the old Mather apartments in a panic. He was then accidentally killed on the street. For such a small role, Eric did not bother to find the original actor. Instead, the casting director chose a Latino actor in his 30s named Philip Reed. The scene where Willie was hit by the truck was also quite dangerous. Therefore, even though Philip Reed was only a small role, he still had to be upgraded. Otherwise, if Philip Reed was accidentally injured, the crew would have to change the actor at the last minute. Stan, are you ready? Eric walked up and asked. Of course, I promise there won't be any problems. Get ready. Stan Winston gestured that he was ready. Eric returned to the monitor and looked around again. After confirming that there were no problems, he shouted, "Action!" A red car and another truck drove toward each other. In the shot, Willie, played by Philip Reed, looked terrified and forgot to dodge. In the other camera, the two cars crashed into each other with a bang. Good one shot. Special effects crew, get ready. Hey, you two, help Mr. Reed to the side to rest, Eric said with a sigh of relief. No accidents, very good. Philip Reed, who was standing next to the two colliding cars, was so scared that he went limp. He had to be helped down by two staff members. Although the stunt staff had repeatedly assured him that there would be no problems, and that there would be no danger at all from where Philip Reed was standing, it was inevitable that he would feel timid when he saw the two cars colliding next to him. However, it was impossible to use a stunt double for this frontal shot. After Philip Reed left, after some simple preparations, a special effects crew member dressed exactly like Philip Reed walked out and stood in the gap between the two cars. He had a wire hanging from his body and was ready to shoot the scene where Willie was hit. This shot was quite difficult. In order to avoid being exposed, the special effects crew member had to land face first after flying up. Therefore, the special effects crew member's face was covered with protective gear. Although the person in charge of the stunt was an experienced stunt technician from Stan Winston's studio, it still took him 7 or 8 tries to get it right. The stunt technician also endured falling down 7 or 8 times in a row. After all, it wasn't easy to land face first. After completing these 2 scenes, the rest of the shoot went a lot smoother, including the scene where Willie's soul was dragged away by the Grim Reaper. Actually, it was just a scene where the Grim Reapers in blue tights dragged the screaming Willie to a corner. In post-production, these people would go through special effects to create the desired image of the Grim Reaper. Although the scenes were simple, it was already past 11 a.m. by the time they finished filming. When Eric returned to the hotel, it was already past 12:30 a.m. Eric, I've asked the kitchen to prepare supper. Joanna Pakula, who had just come out of the shower and was sitting in the living room watching TV, stood up and said. Eric stepped forward and kissed the girl's face. Didn't I tell you that if we finish too late, you can rest first? The girl took the towel from Eric's hand and carefully wiped the man's wet hair. She said, It's okay. Didn't you ask me to be your personal assistant? Of course I have to do this job well. Eric put his arm around the girl's waist with a naughty smile. So obedient. Are you willing to do anything I ask of you? Joanna Pakula struggled slightly, but couldn't get rid of the man's grip. Soon she softened. However, she didn't answer Eric's question. Instead, she put the towel in her hand aside and complained, We've been busy all day. Let's get some news early after supper. Anyway, we'll have plenty of time in the future. Then you stay here tonight. I want to sleep with you in my arms, Eric said softly as he sniffed the girl's long hair. Okay. Oh, don't touch me. The supper will get cold soon. Hurry up and eat. After a while of intimacy, Eric walked to the dining table and had supper. From time to time, he chatted with the girl who was leaning on the sofa and looking over. After that day, Eric took the girl to New York. Joanna Pakula didn't resist. After these days of getting along, she also developed a faint sense of dependence on Eric. The special effects scenes of Ghost took 2 weeks to finish shooting. After a detailed review and confirmation, Eric handed the sample film to Stan Winston and others to take to Los Angeles for post-production. This was because the special effects used in Ghost were relatively simple, and there weren't many special effects shots. Many of the shots could even be completed using the most primitive film overlapping technique. Therefore, even if Eric had high requirements for some effects, the post-production wouldn't take more than a month. At most, it would be completed by the end of May. At that time, with Eric's filming speed, the whole movie wouldn't be far from completion. After the completion of the special effects part, it was May. Gradually, people began to visit the set. To Eric's surprise, the first to visit the set were the Trumps. Donald Trump brought his daughter, Ivanka Trump. It was noon, because they had to shoot several outdoor scenes before. And after Sam took Oldham to the bank to withdraw money, the crew blocked off a street that wasn't too busy in Manhattan. Eric, I'm really sorry. I couldn't help much with the matter some time ago. Donald Trump's first sentence was to apologize when he saw Eric. Eric smiled. Donald Trump really couldn't have helped much with that matter. It's okay, Donald. By the way, how are things on your side? Hearing this question, Donald Trump smiled. It's okay. I finally got through it. Thanks to your reminder, after spending some effort, the bank had no choice but to agree to continue the loan to me. Now that the resort has been completed and part of it is already in use, at least I won't go bankrupt again. After Donald Trump finished speaking, he conjured a card from his pocket and handed it to Eric. This is a membership card for my resort. Of course, this is the highest level. You can go to Atlantic City to take a look when you have time. Eric smiled and took the membership card. After thinking for a while, he remembered that Atlantic City should be in New Jersey. He had never been there. Some time ago, he happened to see on the entertainment news that Michael Jackson had attended the opening of Trump Resort. I'll go take a look when I have time. After Eric finished speaking, he looked at the little lowly who was hugging a doll and walking around curiously. Innie, why didn't you say hello when you saw me? You look so unhappy. Did someone bully you? Chapter 329. Ivanka Trump wrinkled her nose and snorted. Then, she glared at her father with dissatisfaction. Donald Trump awkwardly whispered to Eric, Innie is angry with me. I promised to bring her over to watch your movie. That's why she's willing to talk to me. Eric raised his eyebrows slightly. Did something happen? I divorced Innie's mother some time ago. Donald Trump didn't hide it. So you know. Eric remembered that he had seen Donald Trump's wife at the premiere of Home Alone 2 a year ago. At that time, there didn't seem to be anything wrong with the two of them. However, this was someone else's family matter, so he couldn't ask too much. The divorce rate of Americans was more than 50%. Eric was almost used to this kind of thing. Among the people he knew now, most of them had divorced or their parents had divorced. After a few rounds, Ivanka suddenly leaned in front of Eric. Eric, Dad and Mom divorced. You're not a good person either. Eric was slightly taken aback. This logic is a bit strong. Your dad dumped your mom. What does it have to do with me? Eric helplessly spread his hands. Innie, I'm innocent. It doesn't seem to have anything to do with me, right? Did you forget what you promised me? Ivanka asked angrily. Eric thought for a moment, and then shook his head. Why don't you give me a hint? Bad guy. Ivanka hit Eric with the Mina bunny doll in her hand. You promised me that you would let me act in your movie. Now you're shooting a movie, but you didn't tell me. Oh, that. Eric suddenly realized. He had just mentioned it casually. He thought that with Ivanka's age, she might forget it quickly. He didn't expect the little loli to remember it even deeper than him. But there's no role for a little girl in this movie. Bad guy. You're lying. I won't talk to you anymore. Ivanka turned her face and said angrily. Ignoring him was a serious threat. Eric thought for a moment before saying, Innie, how about this? Later on, you will act as a little girl passing by the main lead. Yes, it would be best if you could hug your rabbit. Ivanka wanted to continue being angry, but she couldn't resist Eric's temptation. She quickly turned her face away. Really? Of course. Eric nodded solemnly. After all, it was just a passerby role. Of course, he couldn't say that out loud. I remember you saying that you joined an acting class. Let me see the results of your practice. You'll definitely be surprised. A guy who doesn't know anything other than directing. Little Loli said sarcastically. Eric was a little speechless. He hadn't forgotten this sentence. The lunch break passed quickly. Nicolas Cage and Whoopi Goldberg's scenes were needless to say. Originally, the passers-by on the street were all adults, and there were no little girls. Now that little Loli suddenly joined, Eric had to rearrange the scene. Innie, when that lady comes here, she can pull you along and start walking around. Keep walking along this road until you reach the other side. Remember, you have to act as if nothing happened. Don't look at the camera lens, and don't look curiously at the lady in the pink coat. I know. You're so long-winded. Ivanka waved her hand. Eric shrugged and walked back to the director's seat. Originally, he had suggested for Donald Trump to hold little Loli's hand and sit with her as passers-by. Donald Trump was of course very happy to be able to mend his relationship with his daughter. Unfortunately, little Loli wasn't willing. Eric could only choose a lady from the extras to hold little Loli's hand and act as a mother and daughter pair. Everyone, get ready to shoot. Eric held the loudspeaker and shouted at everyone. The actors began to take their positions. Action. As soon as the voice fell, the camera showed Odimi, who had just donated the $4 million check to the Welfare Institute, walking forward with a depressed expression. Odimi, I'm proud of you. Sam's ghost said as she followed behind Odimi. I don't care if you're proud of me or not. What does a nun need so much money for? Odimi, played by Whoopi Goldberg, complained angrily to the air, Stop pestering me, and stop talking to me. Sam looked at Odimi, who was walking away, and added, You're amazing. Hearing this, Odimi suddenly turned around. Of course, she couldn't see Sam, so she looked around, spat in the air, and turned away. Her figure looked so funny that Eric almost wanted to applaud. At the same time, on the monitor, on the other side of the road, the little girl holding the Mina Bunny plushie held the hand of a lady and walked across the street as if nothing had happened. Little Loli even glanced at Odimi, who seemed to be talking to the air, and then looked up as if she said something to her mother. However, the extra actress obviously didn't realize that the little girl would suddenly talk to her. Her expression froze and her footsteps paused for a moment. Cut. Eric shook his head regretfully. If the extra actress could cooperate, this scene would be perfect. After all, Odimi was talking to the air and spitting. It would be abnormal if the passers-by didn't have any reaction. And the little girl asking her mother what Odimi was doing out of curiosity looked very natural. Wait a moment, Eric said to everyone, and then walked to Ivanka and the extra actress. Madam, what's your name? Director Williams. You can call me Elena. The extra actress was obviously a little nervous. She also realized that the problem just now was with her. Although she was a little angry that the little girl suddenly spoke out of the blue, she didn't dare to say it. After all, the little girl had a very special relationship with the director. Well, Madam Elena, what did Innie say to you just now? She asked me, Auntie. Why did that lady act like that? Elena said honestly. Eric nodded. That's right. If you had reacted appropriately just now, then the scene just now would have been perfect. In comparison, Whoopi Goldberg was talking to the air, so passers-by would definitely take a second look. So Innie's reaction was right. Oh, don't worry, I'm not criticizing you. I just hope that you can cooperate with the next scene and react appropriately. Then, how should I react? Elena asked. Eric looked at Ub Goldberg, who came over and said with a smile, "If you see a woman acting crazy on the street with a child beside her, your first reaction will definitely be to speed up and leave." "Hey Eric, which part of me looks like I'm crazy?" "You look like you do in every way," Eric said to Ub Goldberg with a smile. "Alright, that's it." After Eric said that, he reached out and pinched the little lowly's face. "Innie, you did well just now. Let's continue. You're so annoying. Don't pinch my face." Ivanka, who was a little smug, suddenly waved her little hand angrily and swatted away Eric's devil's claws that reached out to her face. Eric smiled and shrugged, then instructed everyone to start again. It was still the same scene just now. Nicolas Cage and Ub Goldberg's performance was still impeccable. When Audrey walked to the middle of the road and spat into the air, a pair of mother and daughter happened to pass by. The little girl, who was hugging the Mina Bunny plushie, glanced at Audrey and curiously looked up to say something to the middle-aged woman. The woman quickly glanced at Ub Goldberg and did not explain. Instead, she nervously grabbed the little girl's little hand and walked away quickly. "Good, it's perfect," Eric said as he clapped. Although many people around did not know what exactly happened, they also clapped in support. When the next scene was arranged, the little lowly proudly came to Eric's side and reached out her little hand to him. "What?" Eric looked at the little hand in confusion and asked. Chapter 330. My reward, Eric, $20. Ivanka said confidently. Everyone was amused by Lorita's money grubber look. Eric laughed too. He took out his wallet from his pocket and asked curiously, "Innie, what do you want the money for?" "I don't like my father anymore. I've decided not to spend his money anymore," Ivanka said crisply. Donald Trump, who was standing at the side, rubbed his forehead awkwardly. However, there was a smile on his face. Eric glanced at Donald Trump, held the wallet he had just taken out in his hand, and asked again, "But your school fees, food, and accommodation are all your father's money, right?" "I've checked. This is my father's duty as a father. However, other than that, I don't want to spend his money anymore. Look, I bought the rabbit plushie with the money I earned from cleaning the house," Ivanka said seriously. She looked very cute when she was serious. However, her bright eyes stared at Eric's wallet as if she was afraid that Eric would go back on his word. Eric looked down in his wallet and took out a $100 bill. He handed it over and said, "Take it. The extra will be your reward for your outstanding performance. Don't treat me like a child. My father did that before. I don't want it. $20 it is." The crowd of onlookers finally burst into laughter. All right. Eric shook his head with a smile. He opened his wallet, only to find a stack of $100 bills. "Look, Innie, I don't have any change. What do you think I should do?" Although the people around them definitely had $20 bills, Eric still showed his wallet to Ivanka. He wanted to tease the little girl. Ivanka carefully looked at Eric's wallet and was stunned. As Donald Trump's daughter, the little girl used to live a carefree life. Whatever she wanted, someone would buy it for her. Therefore, she rarely came into contact with money. Due to her parents' sudden divorce some time ago, Ivanka had the idea of earning money on her own. Now that she was faced with such a complicated problem that she had never experienced before, she was suddenly at a loss of how to deal with it. Therefore, the little girl subconsciously looked at her father. "Innie, if you want my help, you'll have to pay a consultation fee. $20. Donald Trump said in a businesslike tone with a straight face. Ivanka stared at her father angrily and looked at Eric again. $20. Ivanka repeated. She then looked at Eric without blinking. It was obvious that the little girl was not going to be reasonable. Eric saw the assistant director gesturing to him that the next scene was ready. Therefore, he did not have time to joke with Ivanka. He stuffed the $100 bill into Ivanka's hand and said, "Here, take the $100. The remaining $80 will be the advance payment. You can make 4 cameo appearances in my movies in the future." Ivanka was about to return the money to Eric in dissatisfaction when she heard what he said. She tilted her head and thought that it was a good idea. The most important thing was that Eric did not charge her a consulting fee, like her despicable father did. Therefore, she nodded quickly and said, "No problem. But you can only make 4 cameo appearances." "Of course." Eric nodded. Looking at Ivanka's little face, he somehow thought of an old man who always appeared and disappeared mysteriously in superhero movies. It would be very interesting if there was always a little girl who appeared and disappeared mysteriously with a doll in her arms, wouldn't it? After the filming started again, Donald Trump tactfully left with his daughter. In the next few days, the filming of the exterior scenes was almost done. Eric began the most important indoor scenes. Sam and Molly's house was set in an apartment in Soho, Manhattan. Soho was originally an old industrial area in New York. Later, due to the decline of New York's manufacturing industry, there was a period of time when a large number of factory apartments were empty. Because of the cheap rent, many artistic creators who came to New York to pursue their dreams gathered here and rented cheap factory buildings as their own studios. Over the decades, Soho gradually became synonymous with contemporary art. The concept of Soho also spread throughout the world with the development of the times. Molly and Ghost was an artist. Therefore, the two of them living here was very suitable for their roles in the movie. Because of the report about the plane crash on TV, Sam's pessimistic words caused Molly to lose sleep. Therefore, the girl got up alone to make ceramics. Sam, who woke up in a daze, found that his lover had left and went to Molly's studio. Immediately, it created the most classic scene in Ghost. "I want to be able to shoot this scene with a stage effect. The most important thing is the lighting." This scene is roughly divided into 2 parts. The first part is the scene where the embryo is pulled. Look, although there is a light here, I don't need it to be used in the shot. I just need a lighting effect. As for the second part, I need a high contrast lighting effect, Eric said as he walked around the room with the lighting technician. The lighting technician nodded repeatedly to show that he understood. After a series of instructions, Eric walked to Nicolas Cage and Bridget Fonda, who were preparing. Initially, Cage and Bridget Fonda were chatting casually. It was obvious that the relationship between the two was somewhat intimate. In fact, this was the effect that Eric needed. As a touching romance film, if the male and female protagonists did not have chemistry, unless the two actors' acting skills reached a certain level, it would be a disaster for the movie. Because of this, although Bridget Fonda was very beautiful, Eric did not make a move like he did in the past. He needed the female lead to maintain chemistry with the male lead. When it came to movies and women, Eric had always been clear about the relationship between the primary and the secondary. In Eric's heart, movies had always been the most important. This was the foundation for him to establish himself in Hollywood. As long as he could achieve enough success in movies, chasing women would be a piece of cake. Seeing Eric coming over, the two who were chatting involuntarily wanted to get up. "It's okay. Have a seat." Eric waved his hand and pulled a chair to sit opposite the two. He casually asked, "What were you talking about just now?" The two looked at each other. Then Bridget said, "Cage said that a famous English troupe will be performing Hamlet on Broadway tomorrow night. He asked if I wanted to go see it." Chapter 331. Hamlet. Not bad. As long as it doesn't affect the shooting, you can arrange your time in private. Eric nodded noncommittally and did not express any opinions. He then asked, "How's the preparation for the next scene coming along?" Hearing Eric's words, Bridget Fonda was clearly a little disappointed. Although Cage was very outstanding now, he was still a far cry from Eric. When she got the role, Bridget Fonda felt that with Eric's rumored personality, something would definitely happen during the filming process. After all, she was very confident in her appearance. Unfortunately, things did not go as she wished. Now that filming had been going on for more than half a month, Eric had never shown any interest in her. Bridget Fonda's nature as a woman's resentment inevitably made her feel a little indignant. Seeing that Bridget Fonda was no longer speaking, Cage quickly said, "It's all ready. Bridget and I have rehearsed several times in our free time. There definitely won't be any problems." "Rehearsal?" Eric asked subconsciously. After all, after the stretching scene, there would be an intimate scene that would last more than 2 minutes. Cage also realized that his answer was a little ambiguous, so he explained awkwardly, "It's just a simple rehearsal. Nothing else." Eric was not interested in such details, so he nodded and said, "Okay, you guys continue to prepare. I'll go take a look at the set." As soon as Eric left, Bridget Fongda punched Cage in a shrewish manner. "Who rehearsed with you? We clearly just had a casual chat." Cage was a little embarrassed. "Do you want me to tell the director the truth that we didn't do much preparation? You shouldn't have said that. You clearly know what's going to happen next." "Okay, that's a mistake." Cage shrugged. "But Bridget, you don't have a chance. Everyone can tell that Eric and his personal assistant, Joanna Pakula, are very close. Let me tell you, a few days ago when I woke up for a run, I saw that woman coming out of Eric's room." Bridget Fongda never expected her thoughts to be seen through by Cage as she reflexively retorted, "What has that got to do with me?" "Well, forget what I said," Cage said, then picked up the script and began to read. Bridget Fongda also raised the script in her hand to block her face, but it was inevitable that she was a little distracted. The camera paused on the quiet corridor for a moment before moving slowly. Finally, it stopped on Emily, who was concentrating on making a vase. The vertical orange light shone on the girl, who was wearing a simple sleeveless shirt, giving her an indescribable sense of beauty. In her free time over the past few days, Bridget Fongda had been learning the art of pulling embryos from the ceramic master hired by the production crew. On the shelf near the girl were the works she had personally completed over the past few days. At this moment, in the camera, Bridget Fongda was doing quite well. A vase embryo was gradually taking form in the woman's hands. The silence lasted for a moment before Sam, bare-chested, walked out from behind Jasmine. His arms were folded in front of him, and he had a drowsy look on his face. "What are you doing?" "I can't sleep," Emily said, turning her head to look at him. Sam moved a stool to sit behind his lover and said apologetically, "I must have fallen asleep. What time is it again?" 2 in the morning, Emily said as she stuck her head out and pecked Sam lightly on the lips. After carefully observing Emily's movements for a while, Sam gently poked the woman's waist when she bent over, and the vase embryo in Emily's hands suddenly became deformed. Emily did not mind at all, and twisted her waist. Her boyfriend had no choice but to let go of her. He reached out and touched the embryo gently, instantly destroying it. "Oh no, I hope this isn't your masterpiece," Sam said with an insincere smile. Emily pursed her lips helplessly and said, "Not anymore." Emily removed the clay from the extractor and planned to start again. Sam asked tentatively, "Can I help?" "Of course, place your hand here and let the clay flow through your fingers," Emily instructed Sam. However, Sam was not too obedient and kept teasing the woman. Gradually, Emily also began to feel aroused, and the two of them naturally kissed. "Cut!" Eric called out at the right time. The two actors stopped and walked to his side under Eric's instructions. Eric instructed the stage supervisor, who quickly got to work and placed an identical embryo on the extractor. Although this was already the 6th take, Eric still replayed the scene calmly and explained the strengths and weaknesses of the two actors. He did not show any signs of impatience, because Eric knew that once he showed that he could not see it, the two actors would definitely be affected by his emotions and become anxious. Therefore, he spoke with a faint tone of encouragement. "Nick, your performance just now was almost perfect, but there's one thing you need to pay attention to. Look at this scene. Your smile is a little too forced. It'd be better if you were more relaxed. And Bridget, you only need to remember one emotion, and that is indulgence. Although your lover is making trouble for you, you can't show any displeasure from the beginning to the end. Instead, you have to indulge your boyfriend like a mother indulging her naughty child." "Like, mother?" Bridget Fongda asked in puzzlement. Eric nodded and said, "Yes, think of when you were young and your mother was cooking dinner in the kitchen, and you ran in to help. Back then, although your mother would pretend to be angry and glare at you, she would definitely have a loving smile on her face. I need you to express this indulgence emotion." Hearing Eric's words, Bridget Fongda's eyes became a little blank. Eric wanted to facepalm helplessly. It seemed that she was another poor girl from an unlucky family. in short indulgence. Take a 5-minute break and let the makeup artist touch up your makeup. Take a good look at what I just said. Don't be in a hurry. It'll be fine as long as we can finish this scene today, Eric said again. Bridget Fonda and Cage nodded and walked to the rest area together. Eric walked to the automatic record player and inserted the unrestrained melody record into it. He pressed the play button, and a familiar melody immediately came from the set. With the help of the makeup artist, Fonda and Cage, who were touching up their makeup, looked over and understood that Eric had specially played it for them. They listened quietly. Chapter 332. In the shot, the girl hung on Sam like a koala bear, kissing the man infatuatedly. The two of them slowly fell onto the sofa next to them. Good, this one is done. After more than 4 hours, Eric, who was sitting behind the monitor and staring at the screen, finally shouted. Everyone present, including the two protagonists who had just gotten up from the sofa, breathed a sigh of relief. It was less than 4 minutes, and there was only one page in the script. After 4 hours of shooting, anyone would inevitably feel anxious. However, Eric, who should have been the one to explode the most, didn't say anything. Of course, the people present didn't dare to show their impatience. They just repeated the scene over and over again. Eric looked at his watch and said, "Let's call it a day. It's already very late. There's no need to tidy up here for the time being. Go back and rest as soon as possible." Before everyone had time to cheer for the director's thoughtfulness, Eric added, "Don't be late tomorrow." There was a sudden cry around, but no one dared to complain. After all, they were all paid enough overtime, and Eric definitely had work to do next. He was much more tired than they were. The crowd quickly dispersed. By the time Eric and the assistant director checked the film material together and put it away in the safe, more than half an hour had passed. The shooting in Manhattan, New York had been going on for nearly a month. Because Eric had a ready-made film in his mind as a reference, his shooting progress had always been much faster than other Hollywood directors. In just a month, the shooting of Ghost had been completed by 2/3. It might only take another 10 days of shooting before it could be wrapped up. There was also news from Los Angeles from time to time. The production of the film's special effects was going smoothly. Eric even watched part of the effects through a video call. The filming of Basic Instinct in San Francisco did not go so smoothly. It was not because of the male and female protagonists. The performances of the two protagonists were very good. It was because of something else. As everyone knew, San Francisco was a city where homosexuals gathered in North America. Because of a controversial scene in Basic Instinct that was reported by the paparazzi with exaggerated details, it caused protests from San Francisco homosexual organizations. Some people even obstructed the filming of the movie. Jeffrey had to personally contact the San Francisco Police Department for help. These days, Basic Instinct had been filming under the protection of more than 50 police officers all day long. For this reason, the crew had to pay a large sponsorship fee to the San Francisco Police Department. On the other hand, Firefly's first movie, The Silence of the Lambs, had already finished filming for more than a week. It was said that in order to complete the movie as soon as possible, the crew had to split into 3 parts. By the end of May, the film would have completed its post-production work. However, due to the rush of production, the original 20 million yuan cost had increased to 25 million yuan. Eric had not seen the sample yet, but he believed that with the original director, Jonathan Demme, directing the movie, and even the 2 main actors, there would not be any changes. This movie should not be too different from his previous life. According to the plan, the movie would start screening at the beginning of June. The official release date was scheduled for June 8th. However, Robert Shea only arranged for 1,500 premiere theaters for the movie. Although Eric knew that Robert Shea was squeezing resources for his own movie, Sleeping with the Enemy, Eric did not say much. It was good enough that the movie could be released during the summer. After all, The Silence of the Lambs was an R-rated bloody horror movie. According to Hollywood's usual practice, this kind of movie would either be released during the Easter season or at the end of the summer. It was very lucky that it could be released during the popular summer. As for 1,500 theaters, it was not a small number for a horror movie. In addition to the movie, Eric gradually realized that he had more things to do. Not only did he have to worry about Firefly's operations, but he also had to deal with Pixar, Digital Domain, and even Cisco from time to time. Although he had been focusing on Firefly, Eric did not stop paying attention to these companies. Due to sufficient financial support, the production of Toy Story was already more than halfway done. It might not make it in time for the Christmas season, but it would definitely make it in time for next year's summer. This version of Toy Story was much more refined than the one in his previous life. There were many more details, and the total length was not 81 minutes like in his previous life. Instead, it had been increased to a more standard 90 minutes. Eric believed that the appearance of Toy Story would definitely surprise the Hollywood film industry. As for Digital Domain, Eric was very assured to hand it over to Stan Winston. He only arranged for a financial director to supervise the company's finances in the digital domain. He did not intervene much in other aspects. After going public in February, Cisco's stock price skyrocketed. Although it slowed down after more than a month, after Cisco's first quarter profit report was released, the stock price rose again. Eric had invested $70 million, and it was now worth more than $200 million, and it showed no signs of stopping. Many investors had already begun to regret transferring their original shares to Firefly Investments. While paying attention to these things, Eric gradually realized that the people around him had become a little strange. Occasionally, they would look at him strangely, as if they were planning something. This feeling was very subtle, and he could not tell whether it was his illusion or not. For example, today the crew members all found excuses to ask for leave, hoping that Eric could end today's shoot an hour earlier. At the same time, they also said that they had things to do. If it was only one or two of them, it would be fine, but everyone was like this. If Eric still did not realize something, there would really be a problem with his IQ. Because everyone's attitude was firm and unanimous, Eric had to compromise. Anyway, after working so hard for so many days, the film was almost finished. He planned to comply with the public's wishes. However, when it was time to wrap up, Eric still caught the cameraman, Nickel, who was about to leave. "Nickel, tell me what happened." Nickel looked at Eric strangely, as if to remind him, but also felt that it was a little unbelievable. Faced with Eric's interrogation, Nickel looked around and saw that many people were looking in his direction. He quickly shook his head and said, "Eric, I can't tell you. I'll be killed." "If you don't tell me, I'll kill you right now," Eric threatened. The cameraman straightened his neck and looked like he was ready to die. Anyway, he knew that Eric could not do anything to him. Eric punched Nickel and said, "Okay, get out of here. I hope you don't cause any trouble for me." "Of course not, of course." Nickel smiled and nodded. After walking a few steps away and making sure that Eric could not hear him, Nickel could not help but sigh. Unbelievable, really unbelievable. You can forget this kind of thing. No wonder you're a workaholic. Chapter 333. With a head full of doubts, Eric cleaned up the set and returned to the hotel where he was staying. He found that the first floor where the crew was staying was deserted. The lively scene after the crew had finished work had completely disappeared. As soon as he opened the door and walked into his room, a pink figure floated on top of him. She wrapped herself around Eric like a koala and kissed him. Okay, Drew, why are you in New York?" Eric pulled Drew off of him and looked at her. She was wearing a pink knee-length skirt. Her hair was in a bun, and it seemed that she had cut her hair. The fringe on her forehead set off her unique aura. "I'm here to visit," Drew said with a smile. She pulled Eric to sit next to her and sat on Eric's lap. Eric looked at the lass's rolling eyes and quickly realized that today's matter had something to do with the lass. Eric said, "Okay, tell me honestly, what are you guys planning?" "Hee, I won't tell you," Drew said shamelessly as she propped herself up in front of Eric. Eric immediately scratched the girl's armpit. The little girl chattered for a while before Eric let her go. "Are you going to tell me or not?" Eric made a gesture to continue scratching her. Okay, you'll know later," Drew said and stood up. She sat down and took a few deep breaths. Then, she took out an eye mask from the coffee table. Here, put it on first. I'll take you somewhere. Eric took it and played with it. He looked up and smiled. What if I don't want to? Then I'll cry for you to see. The little girl immediately threatened. This isn't a common scene. Come on, cry, Eric said with interest. Drew wrinkled her face and sniffed a few times. She didn't squeeze out a single tear. Then she screamed and jumped into Eric's arms. She scratched Eric's body like a wildcat. Put it on, put it on, put it on. Okay, stop scratching, I'll put it on, Eric said helplessly. He was curious to see what the girl was going to do today. Drew put on the eye mask and pulled Eric out. Eric only felt like he entered an elevator and was pulled into a car. Then he heard the sound of the car starting. Hey, I'll say this first. Don't go overboard. Otherwise, I'll be angry. Am I that kind of person? The girl retorted. Aren't you? Oomph. The car wasn't fast and Eric wasn't in a hurry. He leaned against the back of the seat with the eye mask on. He closed his eyes and rested for a while. After a while, Eric felt that the car was still driving. It didn't seem like it was going to stop anytime soon, and Eric was already a little sleepy. How much longer? Eric couldn't help but ask. Don't worry. The girl looked at the pager in her hand. In fact, the car had been driving around the streets of Manhattan to buy time, but Eric didn't know. Eric didn't say anything and leaned against the back of the seat again. The pager in his hand finally beeped. Drew gestured to the driver, and the car sped up. It only took them 10 minutes to arrive at their destination. The girl pulled Eric all the way out of the underground parking lot and into the elevator. A few minutes later, the girl pushed open a door and whispered in Eric's ear, "Surprise." Then she quickly pulled off Eric's eye mask. The sound of firecrackers and flying ribbons filled the hall. The people in the hall had obviously rehearsed this, and they all said in unison, "Happy birthday." Wow, Eric exclaimed, not knowing what to do. Hearing this, he finally remembered that today was the 16th of May, the birthday of the original owner of this body. In his previous life, Eric didn't care much about birthdays, let alone now. In addition, he had been so busy these days that his feet didn't touch the ground, so Eric couldn't even remember this. Familiar faces crowded around him. In addition to the crew members, the actors and directors that he had worked with over the past year were all here. The executives of Firefly and Pixar were also here. Eric also saw Stan Winston, who was supposed to be in Los Angeles, and James Cameron, who was supposed to be preparing for Terminator 2. Obviously, in order to prepare for this birthday party, Drew must have put in a lot of effort. It wasn't easy to just hide it from him. After joking around for a while, the crowd slowly dispersed. Hey Jonah, how's the post-production of The Silence of the Lambs going? Not bad, my movie. Of course, it's almost done. Wow, I didn't expect you to come. Tom, what films have you taken on recently? Of course, what I said still counts. Hello, Julia. Hey Liz, it's my birthday today. You can't be like this, like an old hen. Robert, how's the filming of Sleeping with the Enemy going? Well, when I'm done with Ghost, I'll go take a look. You should believe in Julia. She has enough box office appeal now. After walking around and greeting the guests one by one, Eric was finally able to take a short break. He found a sofa in the corner and sat down. The little girl who had been sticking to him righteously all this time carefully poured a glass of juice for Eric. At this time, James Cameron, who had greeted him not long ago, walked over with his wife, Catherine Bigelow. Hi Jim and Ms. Bigelow. Eric straightened up. James Cameron and Catherine Bigelow sat down next to Eric. Looking at the couple, Eric couldn't help but recall some memories from his previous life. Cameron aside, Catherine Bigelow was also a legendary woman in Hollywood. The themes of this female director's movies were completely different from those of other women in Hollywood. It could even be said that Catherine Bigelow's movies had little to do with women. Just listen to the names of the movies she directed. Assassination of Osama bin Laden, The Hurt Locker, K-19, End of the Century Frenzy. Most importantly, in the parallel universe, Catherine Bigelow was the first female winner of the Best Director award in the history of the Oscars. Moreover, Kathryn Bigelow's biggest rival for that year's Oscars was James Cameron, who was sitting next to her at this moment. The level of excitement was enough to make a movie, such as The Attack of the Ex-Wife or something. In his memory, James Cameron had a spark with the female lead of Terminator 2, Linda Hamilton, when he was filming Terminator 2. After Terminator 2 was released, Cameron quickly divorced Kathryn Bigelow. Eric, actually, I want to discuss something with you, James Cameron said after greeting Eric. Eric made a puzzled expression. He thought to himself, don't tell me you want the best investment so soon? The movie hasn't even started shooting yet. Seeing Eric's expression, James Cameron looked at his wife. Kathryn Bigelow took the initiative to say, "It's like this, Mr. Williams. Just call me Eric," Eric interrupted her. Kathryn Bigelow did not show any displeasure. She nodded and said, "Some time ago, I got a good script. It's a story about surfers, but because of a conflict in the casting, Columbia Pictures, who originally owned the copyright, gave up the project. So I'm now looking for investors." When Eric heard the word surfer, he vaguely thought of a movie, but he had not seen it. He had only seen some introductions in his previous life. He only remembered the male lead of the movie. "Can you introduce the plot?" Eric asked. "It's roughly like this. The new young FBI agent, Johnny, is investigating a bank robbery. After some investigation, he finds that many clues point to a group of surfers. So Johnny goes to the beach in Southern California and explains the young surfing coach, Tyler. It took Kathryn Bigelow 5 minutes to briefly recount the entire story, and she also shared some of her own opinions on the shoot. "So you want to tell this story in a darker way, right?" Eric asked. Kathryn Bigelow nodded. "I think this way, we can interrogate human nature more and have more practical significance. By the way, you just said that you and Columbia had a conflict in the casting. Who is the male lead you chose?" Eric asked cautiously, although he already had the answer in his heart. "Keanu Reeves," Kathryn Bigelow said. "This big boy played Ted in Bill and Ted's Adventures last year." Columbia said that Keanu Reeves' image is very different from that of an FBI agent. "However, I think that Keanu Reeves can definitely become an excellent action actor. He has this potential." "Sure enough," Eric said in his heart. After recalling the brief introduction of the movie in his memory, Eric was 80% sure. At this time, when he heard Kathryn Bigelow say Keanu Reeves' name, Eric no longer had any doubts. Although he did not know how the movie turned out, Eric did remember one thing very clearly. In the end, the movie was successful in the box office. As long as he could confirm this, Eric had already made a decision. "Ms. Bigelow, I need a detailed script and project budget," Eric said. Cameron and Kathryn Bigelow both looked surprised. Since Eric said so, it must mean that the other party agreed. The couple did not have much hope. After all, neither of them thought that this was a commercial film. Otherwise, Columbia would not have given up on this project. "Wait, Eric, I didn't bring this information today, but I can give it to you in 3 days." Eric nodded and said, "By the way, who will be the producer of your movie?" Kathryn Bigelow looked at her husband. Originally, Jim had already agreed, but now it seems that we have to change the producer. Originally, we couldn't confirm when we would be able to get the investment. I thought that it wouldn't be too late for Jim to finish filming Terminator 2. "Then I'll be the producer myself," Eric said after thinking about it. "You'll do it?" Kathryn Bigelow immediately revealed a look of suspicion. "Hey Kate, don't you believe that Eric has the ability?" Cameron pretended to be dissatisfied and glared at his wife. Kathryn Bigelow finally reacted. Although Eric was only 20 years old today, the achievements of the young man in front of her made more than 90% of the directors in Hollywood feel inferior. In addition, he was now running a film company second only to the Big Seven in Hollywood. It was definitely more than enough for him to be the producer of a movie. "Okay." Kathryn Bigelow nodded and said, "I was just thinking, Eric, don't you need to shoot your own movie?" "Of course I do, but it doesn't seem to conflict. It just so happens that I haven't done any specific production work before. I believe this is also a form of training." Seeing Kathryn Bigelow's expression just now, Eric quickly waved his hand. "Don't worry, Ms. Bigelow. You should believe in my ability. I think that as long as they know me well enough, no one in Hollywood will doubt my ability, right? Seems like it. Kathryn Bigelow finally nodded. Seeing that the matter was resolved so easily, Cameron's expression changed. He wanted to continue working hard, such as increasing the budget for Terminator 2, or something. However, Eric obviously saw Cameron's intention to take advantage of the situation. It was obviously not a good idea to let Cameron succeed so easily. Eric stood up directly. That's it, Jim. We'll talk about the specifics later. Today is my birthday. Have fun. After saying that, Eric let the little girl take his arm and walk to other places. Hey, Jim. That little guy must have seen through what you wanted to say. After Eric left, Kathryn Bigelow teased him with a hint of mockery. Cameron shrugged indifferently. Anyway, he won't be able to escape sooner or later. Although Kathryn Bigelow wanted to persuade her husband to restrain himself, she gave up when she thought of Cameron's harsh and nitpicky character when making movies. She knew that her husband would definitely not listen to her. Jim, tell me the truth. How much are you planning to spend on Terminator 2? Cameron calculated for a moment, then looked around and sneakily raised a finger at his wife. Kathryn Bigelow sucked in a cold breath. $100 million? Cameron nodded. You must be crazy. That little guy will be pissed to death by you. Kathryn Bigelow said helplessly. After all, in the entire Hollywood, there was no film with an investment of $100 million US. An investment of more than $50 million was enough for the film company to hype up. He has money. Isn't money used to make movies? Cameron retorted righteously. Chapter 334. As the waiter pushed a multi-layered cake into the party hall, the birthday song started playing and the party reached its climax. Several women who were known to be close to Eric were pushed out of the crowd by the guests. They blushed and surrounded Eric as they helped to blow out the candles on the cake. The lively party didn't end until the early hours of the morning. The crowd gradually dispersed. As the host, Eric politely sent them off one by one. During the process, he inevitably encountered a few pairs of resentful eyes. But in this situation, of course, he couldn't bring any women back to his residence. Not only did he have to take care of the other women's feelings, but there were also a lot of paparazzi gathered outside the Hilton Hotel, where the birthday party was held. Eric's every move tonight would definitely be the focus of the paparazzi's attention. For example, now when they were rushing back to the hotel in the same car that they came in, there were several paparazzi following behind them. There were even a few paparazzi riding motorcycles that were close to Eric's car. Although he tried to restrain himself, he had to socialize with so many people. It was inevitable that Eric was a little drunk. At this time, he was leaning against the back of the car. Drew, who was sitting next to him, was leaning on Eric like a kitten. Because there were many people at the party, the girl was very obedient and didn't drink. When they returned to the hotel where the crew was staying, Eric went directly to the floor of the underground parking lot. The girl followed Eric without hesitation, as if everything was natural. Although a lot of crew members who came back at the same time noticed this detail, they turned a blind eye. After all, the girl's curvy figure made it easy for people to forget her age. Eric looked at the girl and shrugged helplessly. Drew, did you get a room at the hotel? Drew raised her hand and pointed at Eric's door. My luggage is inside. Okay. Eric knew that it was useless to say anything more, so he took out the room card from his pocket. As soon as he opened the door, he saw a small mountain of beautifully packaged gift boxes in the suite's living room. Wow, when was this delivered? Eric asked in surprise. I ordered someone to send it over during the party. In fact, gifts have been coming over in the mail for the past few days. Alan and I spent a lot of effort to hide this matter, Drew said with a smile, looking as if he was asking for credit. All right, thank you for preparing this surprise for me. I like it very much. Eric held the girl's little chin and kissed her on the cheek. Feeling that her little hands were about to hug him again, Eric quickly let go. Let's open the gifts. I've never received so many gifts before. Let me help. Drew was obviously interested as well. He walked over and picked up a gift box to take a look. He curled his lips and said, "Oh, you can do this yourself." Eric took it and looked at the name on it. So it was from Nicole. No wonder the girl had such an expression. Eric opened the palm-sized box and saw the gift's content. It was a blue and white striped Versace silk tie. The girl, who had been paying attention to Eric's movements, suddenly widened her eyes when she saw the gift's content. Then she said with dissatisfaction, "She really doesn't hide it. Why didn't she just give him a red tie?" Eric smiled and ignored the smell of the girl's snacks. Generally, only between a man and a woman who were intimate would a woman give a man a tie in the hope of tying the man down. If a woman gave a red tie, it meant that she wanted to marry the man. That was why the girl said that just now. "All right, let's open the others." After the girl said that, she sat cross-legged on the carpet next to the pile of gifts. She picked up a relatively large box that was definitely not a tie and opened it. Eric put the tie that Nicole gave him aside and walked to the pile of gifts. He sat down next to Drew and picked up a box to open. After a while, Eric opened the gift box from Virginia. Then, another tie appeared in front of the two of them. How tasteless. She actually chose this pattern. The girl didn't have as big of a reaction this time, but she still muttered with dissatisfaction. Eric picked up the light blue polka dot tie from Virginia with great interest and gestured in front of him. Then he put it back into the box. After thinking about it, Eric began to look through the pile of gifts. More than 10 minutes later, a few more ties appeared in front of the two of them. "Don't move, let me count." Drew gloomily stopped Eric from putting away the gifts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wah, I don't want to live anymore. The girl was like a young woman who had caught her unfaithful husband on the spot. She jumped up and threw herself on the sofa next to her, covering her head with a pillow as she cried out. Eric ignored the girl. Instead, he held an unsigned gift box in a daze. Of the 6 ties, 5 of them had names: Virginia, Nicole, Jennifer Connolly, Famek Jensen, and Joanna Pakula. Julia and Elizabeth, who he had a relationship with, didn't give him a tie. Then, who was the other person? He put the gift box under his nose and sniffed it. The faint smell of fresh perfume was familiar. A pretty and stubborn face appeared in Eric's mind. Speaking of which, the second season of Friends was about to start filming. He hadn't seen Jennifer Aniston in a long time. Acquaintances in the past were always unforgettable. Although the two of them had broken up, he occasionally saw news about Jennifer Aniston on TV and newspapers. When the paparazzi asked about Jennifer Aniston, she was no longer as excited as when the news first broke out. Seeing that Eric didn't come over to coax her, the girl quickly poked her head out from under the pillow. Seeing that Eric was deep in thought, she stuck out her tongue and obediently climbed down from the sofa to get close to Eric. "Eric, Eric, Eric." Drew waved his hand in front of Eric and called his name several times. Eric pushed the girl's hand away and asked, "By the way, where's your gift?" "Huh?" The girl opened her mouth and hesitated for a moment. She got up and ran to the corner of the living room. She opened her suitcase and took out a small box. She walked back to Eric and said, "Here." Eric looked at the palm-sized box in his hand and suddenly had a premonition. He quickly opened the box and took out a red tie. He waved it in front of the girl and said, "This is too obvious. What did someone say just now?" You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.